The forest was alive with secrets, though no one had yet learned to call them by name. Moss clung to the gnarled roots of ancient trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind as though they carried the memories of millennia. Sunlight pierced the dense canopy in fractured beams, illuminating motes of dust that danced like tiny floating stars. Somewhere deep within this green cathedral, a solitary figure moved unseen but undeniably present. The man was alone, yet his presence was felt, a ripple across the quietude, a subtle disturbance in the rhythm of the forest. He laughed, not a laugh that belonged to company or celebration, but a laugh that seemed to belong only to himself. It cut through the soft hum of insects and the distant cries of birds, startling in its suddenness, yet strangely harmonious with the wild. This was not a laughter born of joy in the conventional sense, nor of mockery or malice. It was a profound, enigmatic sound, echoing across the hollows of trees and over mossy stones, a voice asserting existence in a world indifferent to it. No one knew this man. He had wandered far from the small bands of humans scattered across the land, leaving behind the warmth of kinship for the cold embrace of solitude. And yet, in this very isolation, he was alive in a way that the tribe could never fully comprehend. The forest did not judge him, nor did the wind demand he explain himself. Here, laughter was a language he could understand, a dialogue with the shadows, the leaves, and the unseen creatures that shared the land with him. It was not always so. Once, he had known voices like his own, the laughter of a brother, the gentle chiding of a mother, the curious questioning of a sister. The firelight of a shared evening had been his companion, warmth curling around him like smoke from the hearth. But the world shifted. Tribes migrated, diseases claimed the weak, and the hunger of survival was never satiated. One by one, those familiar faces vanished, leaving only memory and the deep, resonant ache of solitude. Yet the forest, in its boundless indifference, offered him something his people could not: perspective. Here, he could watch the slow ballet of life, a deer pausing by the river, the careful labor of ants transporting leaves, the silent flight of a hawk above. Time moved differently here, measured not in seasons alone but in moments of attention and observation, each one lingering like a precious fragment of eternity. And in these fragments, he found a strange companionship, a sense that the world, though vast and indifferent, acknowledged his presence. The man's laughter had become a ritual. At dawn, it would rise with the sun, fragile and tentative at first, then swelling into a sound that seemed to fill the forest itself. By noon, it had softened, lingering like a memory caught in the branches, and by nightfall, it was a whisper, barely audible, yet persistent. He laughed at the wind, at the rain, at the shadows that danced across the ground. He laughed at the loneliness that could have consumed him, and in doing so, he refused to be swallowed by it. It was not merely the act of laughter that marked him as extraordinary, but the intention behind it. In solitude, most humans would succumb to despair or numbness, but he transformed the emptiness into something almost sacred. Each laugh was a declaration: I am here, I exist, I endure. And for reasons he could not fully articulate, perhaps because words themselves were too crude a vessel, laughter became his primary tool of reflection. It was as much a philosophical act as it was a survival mechanism, a bridge between the tangible world of stone and tree and the abstract realm of thought and emotion. The creatures of the forest took notice. Birds would pause mid-flight, cocking their heads as the laughter passed over them. Squirrels would freeze, tails twitching, unsure of the source of the sound that felt almost human yet entirely alien. Even the river seemed to carry it differently, the ripples catching and refracting the echoes as if curious about their origin. Nature, in its infinite subtlety, responded to him, not with recognition as a human might understand it, but with a quiet acknowledgement of a life intertwined with the rhythms of the wild. And yet, there was mystery. Why did he laugh alone? Was it triumph over the loneliness, a secret celebration of survival, or an acknowledgement of some ineffable truth he had glimpsed in the quiet hours of dawn? No one could answer, and perhaps he could not either. What mattered was the act itself, the affirmation of existence against the void, the insistence that life, even solitary, was worthy of attention, of notice, of sound. Here, in this secluded wilderness, the man became both observer and participant, philosopher and creature, solitary yet inseparable from the world around him. His laughter resonated not just through the forest, but through time itself, an echo of the human need to mark one's presence, to assert one's consciousness in a universe that often seems indifferent. And for those who might someday hear the tale, long after the trees had grown and fallen, long after his footprints had faded from the soil, it would remain a haunting reminder: even in solitude, the human spirit finds ways to speak, to laugh, and to endure. In the shadows of the ancient forest, among the whispering leaves and the restless wind, he laughed again. Not for anyone else, not for the tribe he had lost, nor the ancestors whose faces lingered in memory. He laughed because he could. Because life had offered him the rare gift of solitary observation, and with it, the unspoken permission to revel in his own existence. And in that laughter, the forest itself seemed to lean closer, listening, as if the world were finally paying attention to the man who laughed alone. Morning broke slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and rose. The world seemed to hold its breath in that fragile in-between hour, as if the sun's first light were both a question and an answer. In the distance, mountains loomed like silent sentinels, their jagged edges softened by mist and the gentle hum of awakening life. And there, amidst the vast expanse, walked the man who laughed alone. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one a meditation on the earth beneath him, on the rhythm of breath, on the quiet pulse of life that persisted even without human witnesses. The solitude he carried was not the emptiness of abandonment, it was the presence of a world unshared, a landscape of endless possibilities and quiet revelations. He had not chosen isolation merely to escape others, nor had it been imposed by circumstance alone. It was a natural evolution, a path carved from the convergence of curiosity, survival, and an insatiable desire to understand life on his own terms. In solitude, he could observe without distraction, reflect without interruption, and contemplate existence with a clarity that was impossible amidst the chaos of the tribe. As he walked, the forest responded to him in subtle ways. Leaves shivered as if greeting him, a distant river murmured his passage, and the wind played across the ridges of his face like a gentle caress. Every sound, every movement became a dialogue, a conversation between the human mind and the ineffable complexity of the natural world. In these moments, he discovered patterns that the tribe could not perceive, the nesting habits of birds, the foraging paths of deer, the invisible networks of life beneath the forest floor. These were not merely survival lessons, they were the beginnings of understanding a universe that extended far beyond human perception. Loneliness, when it first settled upon him, had been heavy and suffocating. Nights spent beneath the cold stars were filled with a yearning he could neither name nor silence. He longed for voices, for touch, for recognition, for the simple confirmation that he existed within a shared reality. And yet, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, that initial despair transformed. He began to recognize the subtle joys of solitude, the uninterrupted flow of thought, the freedom to move without constraint, the ability to witness life in its purest, most unfiltered form. Solitude, once a burden, became a lens through which he perceived the extraordinary in the ordinary. The sun rose higher, casting long golden fingers through the canopy. Dust motes glimmered like fragments of forgotten stars, and he paused to watch them drift lazily in the air. His laughter, which had once sounded startling and out of place, now seemed almost inevitable, a natural response to the rhythm of life around him. It was in these solitary mornings that he began to understand the paradox of existence, that being alone did not mean being insignificant, and that isolation could bring a depth of awareness unattainable in the crowded, noisy world of the tribe. In the quiet of dawn, he reflected on the fleeting nature of human life. Faces he had known, siblings, companions, elders, had disappeared like morning mist, leaving only memory as their trace. Yet within that loss, he discovered resilience. Every day he survived, every observation he recorded in the silence of his mind, became a testament to human perseverance. The world was vast, indifferent, and often cruel. Yet in solitude, he found an intimacy with life itself, an intimacy that transcended social bonds and spoke directly to the essence of existence. This was not merely a story of survival, it was a story of transformation. Each morning, the man became both observer and philosopher, exploring not only the contours of the land but the landscape of his own consciousness. He questioned everything, the purpose of laughter, the meaning of memory, the significance of joy and sorrow in a world where both could vanish without warning. His solitude forced him into reflection, and reflection in turn deepened his understanding of life's fragile, fleeting beauty. The forest, ever patient, offered lessons that the tribe could never have provided. Insects moving in synchronized patterns, streams tracing invisible geometries across the stones, the flight of a hawk tracing perfect arcs in the sky, all became metaphors, symbols of forces and truths he could not yet fully articulate. He laughed at these patterns, at their perfection, at the irony of a universe so complex yet so indifferent to human concerns. Each chuckle was both acknowledgement and celebration, a bridge connecting him to the rhythms of existence he could neither change nor escape. Yet even in this transformative solitude, there were moments of acute tension. A rustle in the underbrush, the sudden flight of birds, the eerie stillness of a forest predator, each reminded him of the fragility of his existence. Danger was never abstract here. It was immediate, visceral, and uncompromising. And yet, he met these threats with calm observation rather than panic. Solitude had taught him patience, and patience had taught him perspective. The laughter that rose from his chest was both armor and affirmation, a sound that declared, "I exist. I endure. I watch." By the time the sun reached its zenith, the man had traversed streams, climbed ridges, and explored hidden valleys. Every step, every pause was a meditation on life itself. His mind, once constrained by the expectations and routines of the tribe, now roamed freely, contemplating questions that would have seemed absurd in the presence of others. Why do humans fear solitude? Why do they cling to the familiar even when it suffocates them? And most profoundly, what does it mean to truly exist when the world offers no validation but its silent, indifferent beauty? As the day unfolded, he laughed again. Softly this time, a whisper to the trees, a secret shared with the stones and streams. In that sound was the essence of his transformation, the acceptance of isolation not as punishment, but as an opportunity. In solitude, he had discovered the profound depth of life, the richness of observation and the clarity of thought that comes when the mind is free from distraction. This dawn marked not just the beginning of a day, but the birth of a consciousness fully awake to the mysteries, dangers, and wonders of existence. And so, as the light grew stronger and the forest hummed with life, the man who laughed alone continued his journey, a solitary figure, traversing a world at once beautiful and indifferent, dangerous and generous, fleeting and eternal. In his solitude, he was not lost, he was found. And the dawn of each day became a reminder that, even in isolation, life was a story worth observing, a symphony worth hearing, and a mystery worth embracing. Memory is a strange and delicate thing. For the man who laughed alone, it was both companion and specter, a bridge connecting the present to shadows of the past. He carried his memories not as burdens, but as whispers, soft, fleeting, yet impossible to ignore. Each thought, each recollection, rose unbidden in the quiet hours of solitude, shaping his understanding of the world and of himself. The laughter that punctuated his days was, in part, a response to memory, a recognition of what had been, an acknowledgement of loss, and an acceptance of the impermanence of all things. In the pale light of morning, he paused beside a slow-moving river. Its surface reflected fragments of clouds, trees, and his own solitary figure. The ripples seemed to distort time itself, blending moments long past with the immediacy of now. He remembered the faces of those who had shared his youth, siblings who had vanished into the unpredictable currents of life, companions whose voices were now echoes in the wind, elders whose wisdom had guided him yet had long since returned to the soil. These memories were neither mournful nor joyful, they were precise, vivid, and alive, as though each moment had been pressed into the world like a leaf into a book. Memory carried lessons as well as images. He recalled the day a fire had swept through the grasslands, reducing familiar trees to ash and scattering creatures in panic. The panic had touched him, the chaos had threatened him, yet he had survived. That survival was no accident, it was a pattern of decisions, instincts, and observations etched into his consciousness. In remembering, he reconstructed not only the events themselves, but the subtleties of perception, the way the wind had shifted the scent of smoke, the sounds of frightened animals. Memory became a tool for anticipation, a guide in the wilderness, and a mirror reflecting the contours of his mind. And yet, memory was never entirely rational. Some recollections came as fragments, disjointed and surreal, like dreams pressed into waking life. A laugh shared under a starlit sky, the touch of a hand brushing against his own, the echo of a voice calling from a distant ridge, each returned without warning, unbidden, often accompanied by a sudden surge of emotion. These echoes reminded him that human experience is never linear. Past and present intertwine, forming patterns invisible to the casual observer but vivid to those attuned to the nuances of life. The man's relationship with memory was intimate and philosophical. He understood that memory was not merely a record of events, but a lens through which reality itself was interpreted. Two moments experienced differently by two individuals could diverge into entirely separate worlds. Solitude had heightened his awareness of this truth. Without the constant reinforcement of others' perceptions, he was forced to confront the reality of his own mind, its malleability, its biases, its capacity for both clarity and distortion. In doing so, he began to see memory not as a static archive, but as a living, breathing element of his consciousness, shaping both thought and action. One afternoon, he climbed a ridge overlooking a vast valley. The wind carried scents of earth and stone, of moss and wildflowers, and for a moment the present seemed suspended. His mind wandered to a memory of laughter shared with another, someone long gone, yet vividly alive in his thoughts. The sound of that laughter had been light, unburdened, and it contrasted sharply with the solitude he now inhabited. And yet, there was no longing here, only recognition. Memory allowed him to travel beyond the limitations of his current existence, to inhabit the world of what had been, and, through reflection, to grasp the essence of what it meant to live. Even memories of fear and pain had their place. He remembered a night when predators had surrounded his shelter, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. His heart had raced, and yet he had observed, calculated, and survived. The memory of that night was etched into him not only as trauma, but as triumph. It reminded him that existence is defined as much by adversity as by joy. Memory, in this sense, became a compass, pointing toward understanding, guiding action, and nurturing resilience. Philosophically, the man understood that memory was inseparable from identity. Without it, he would be adrift, a body moving through space without anchor or direction. His solitude had amplified this awareness. In the absence of constant social interaction, his mind became a repository of experience, observation, and reflection. Memories intertwined with the present moment, creating layers of consciousness that informed his laughter, his caution, his wonder, and his contemplation. To exist without memory was impossible. To live with memory fully was to navigate the intricate dance between loss and discovery, between absence and presence. Sometimes, memory brought paradoxical emotions. A memory of warmth, laughter, or companionship could be accompanied by the acute awareness of its absence. Yet this awareness was never a source of despair. It was a meditation on impermanence, a lesson in the transient beauty of life. He laughed softly at these contradictions, at the strange human capacity to cherish and grieve simultaneously, to find meaning in what was gone, and to see continuity in what had shifted. Memory, in this way, became both teacher and companion, offering insight while never diminishing the wonder of the present. As twilight approached, he settled near a tree, its branches silhouetted against the fading light. The wind rustled through leaves, echoing the fragments of memory that had accompanied him throughout the day. He realized that memory was not simply an internal process, but an ongoing dialogue with the world. Every sound, every movement, every shifting shadow became a reminder of what had been, what could be, and what inevitably would pass. His laughter rose into the cooling air, soft, reflective, resonant with both sorrow and joy, a testament to a life lived fully in awareness of its impermanence. By the end of the day, the man who laughed alone understood that memory was not merely a repository of the past, but a foundation for the future. It informed his solitude, enriched his observations, and deepened his philosophical reflections. In the echoes of memory, he discovered the contours of his own existence, the interwoven threads of experience, and the profound connection between the temporal and the eternal. Memory, he realized, was both anchor and sail, rooting him in reality while allowing him to drift into the infinite possibilities of thought, imagination, and reflection. And so, as darkness settled over the valley, he listened to the whispers of the past carried on the wind. Memory, like the stars emerging above him, illuminated the landscape of his mind. And with a quiet, reflective laugh, he embraced both the weight and the gift of recollection, stepping forward into the night with the awareness that life's richness lay as much in what had been as in what would come. The man who laughed alone was never truly alone. Long before words could shape civilization, before settlements and trade, there were eyes that watched, ears that listened, and the subtle presence of others whose existence intersected with his. In the early landscapes of prehistory, the first witness was not a chronicler with ink and parchment, but the earth itself, the animals, and the subtle traces of human interaction. He became aware that to act, to survive, to move through the wilderness was always to be seen, to be noted, to leave a mark that could ripple beyond his immediate comprehension. On a quiet morning, he found himself at the edge of a vast clearing. Mist clung to the ground like a soft shroud, diffusing the light into gentle silver. He observed footprints pressed into the damp soil, some his own, others faint and unknown. The presence of these prints, ephemeral yet lasting in their impression, was a profound revelation. They were proof that he was not solitary in the world, that his actions could be witnessed, interpreted, remembered. There was a certain humility in this realization. Existence itself was a performance, a story told in gestures, glances, and subtle movements, with the world as both stage and audience. The first witness was not merely passive. Birds watched from high branches, their beady eyes tracking his every step, their sudden flights echoing his movements across the forest canopy. The rustle of small mammals, the snap of twigs, even the whisper of wind through leaves, all became a chorus of observation, a network of attention extending beyond himself. He began to understand that being witnessed, even by creatures of instinct, created a subtle responsibility. His laughter, once a private echo, was now a statement, resonating in a world alive with eyes and ears, marking him as both participant and observer in the endless theater of existence. This awareness deepened when he encountered other humans. Perhaps at first there were only fleeting glimpses, shadows between trees, the distant sound of footsteps, the echo of a voice across a valley. The first witness was another mind, alert, curious, assessing. Trust was scarce, interactions were cautious, calibrated. Yet even brief encounters carried weight. A shared glance, a gesture, the rhythm of movement, these were records of presence, documentation of experience, and threads in the invisible web of human connection. In witnessing, they confirmed each other's existence, validated presence in a world that demanded attention to survive. Witnessing also carried power. He realized that to see and to understand was to shape reality. Observation allowed for learning, for anticipation, for the subtle manipulation of outcomes. In prehistory, survival was often determined by the attentiveness of the witness, by the recognition of danger, the discernment of opportunity, the ability to anticipate the unpredictable movements of the natural and human world. To witness was to engage in a form of quiet influence, a shaping of events without overt intervention, a dance of perception that left traces as enduring as footprints in mud. The first witness was not always benign. Predators, large and small, observed him with their own intent. A stalking feline paused in the shadows, amber eyes reflecting understanding and hunger. Scavengers circled in expectation, attuned to weakness or distraction. Even the silent watching of the natural world carried meaning. He had learned to read these witnesses, to interpret gaze, posture, and approach, to understand not only that he was seen, but that his own visibility carried consequences. In a world without written law, being seen was both instruction and judgment, shaping the way he moved, reacted, and lived. Yet witnessing was not confined to survival. It held moments of beauty and connection. He once encountered another human beside a sparkling stream. They did not speak, but their shared silence was a profound communication. Their eyes met, recognition passing without sound. To be witnessed in this sense was to exist fully in the awareness of another, to have one's life mirrored in attention, however fleeting. Laughter, soft, spontaneous, a shared vibration, became the language of presence, a bridge across solitude, a signal that even in isolation, connection was possible. The concept of being the first witness extended beyond immediate encounters. The man noticed traces left by ancestors long gone but still present in the landscape, carvings on stone, patterns in earth, remnants of fire. These were the testimonies of those who had preceded him, witnesses reaching across generations. He felt a kinship with them, a silent conversation stretching through time. In observing their traces, he became both student and storyteller, carrying forward fragments of human experience etched into the world. Memory and witnessing intertwined. To remember was to witness anew, to honor both the living and the departed, and to participate in an ongoing narrative that stretched beyond the limits of individual existence. Witnessing was also a mirror. In seeing others, animals, humans, and the world itself, he began to understand himself. Reflection in water, the study of posture and expression, the careful reading of gestures, all became tools for insight. Observation was a form of meditation, a path to self-awareness. The act of being witnessed, the awareness of the first witnesses around him, created a feedback loop. The more he observed, the more he understood, the more he laughed, and the more fully he engaged with the fragile, beautiful complexity of life. As dusk approached, he returned to a familiar ridge. The wind carried distant sounds, the soft crackle of branches, the calls of nocturnal birds, the subtle stirrings of unseen creatures. He felt a presence in this convergence of sound and shadow, a recognition that the world was alive with witnesses, each perception shaping the texture of experience. Solitude, he realized, was never absolute. It was permeated with attention, both sentient and elemental, a continuous dialogue between self and surroundings. In this realization, he found both humility and empowerment. To exist, to move, to laugh, all were acts of being witnessed, and in witnessing, he became a participant in the vast, intricate web of existence. Night fell, and stars emerged like silent witnesses in the heavens. He gazed upward, contemplating the vastness of time and space, the countless observers that had preceded him, and the unknown eyes that would follow. The first witness, he understood, was not simply another being, it was the recognition that life is perpetually observed, interpreted, and carried forward. And with that understanding came a quiet laughter, soft and reflective, echoing across the valley, a celebration of the intimate and infinite connections that defined existence. Through the lens of witnessing, the man who laughed alone perceived the subtle poetry of life, how observation shapes behavior, memory, and thought, how connection, even unspoken, is an essential thread of humanity, and how to be seen, truly seen, is both gift and responsibility. The first witness was everywhere, in the rustle of leaves, in the gaze of creatures, in the fleeting presence of companions, and in the whispers of the past, and he, in turn, became a witness to all, laughing softly at the infinite continuity of life and experience. Laughter, for most, is a shared sound, a bridge between minds, a signal of connection. Yet in the life of the man who laughed alone, it existed first as a private ritual, a sound that echoed only in the folds of his own awareness. It was born from the quiet recognition of absurdities in the natural world, from the subtle, unspoken revelations of survival, and from the ineffable sensation of simply being alive. In the vast expanses of prehistoric landscapes, laughter became both an affirmation of existence and a secret companion, threading through solitude like a gentle current in a river of silence. He discovered laughter in moments that were at once ordinary and extraordinary. Perhaps it came as he watched the awkward dance of a herd of deer, or when the wind carried the song of a distant bird that seemed almost human in its tone. Laughter was spontaneous, emerging from the unfiltered joy of perception. Unlike fear or hunger, it had no immediate survival purpose. Yet it was powerful, deeply human, a sign of cognitive complexity, a reflection of awareness itself. It was in these moments, unobserved, that he began to understand the paradox of his existence. Profound connection could emerge without an audience, and joy could be as solitary as the night sky. The sound of his laughter, though private, altered the rhythm of his life. Animals reacted in subtle ways, a startled bird taking flight, a fox pausing to look from the shadows. Even the forest seemed to respond, the rustle of leaves echoing faintly like a chorus in harmony with his own. Laughter became a form of dialogue, though one without words. In this way, his solitary laughter was not emptiness, it was conversation with the world itself. Every sound, every ripple of air, every movement in the foliage became a point of contact, a witness to the fleeting intensity of being alive. Yet there was a philosophical tension in laughing alone. Laughter is inherently social, a shared expression of understanding and relief, yet his existed in isolation. He felt the weight of absence, the echo of human connection that had yet to manifest. The realization of his solitude was both painful and illuminating. It revealed the fragility of human life, the delicate balance between the individual and the collective, and the subtle, persistent longing for recognition that defines consciousness. The man laughed not to escape solitude, but to embrace it, to explore the dimensions of his mind unbounded by social constraints. In some ways, solitary laughter became a lens through which he interpreted the world. He laughed at the precarious balance of life, at the intricate interplay between predator and prey, at the tiny miracles that emerged from survival. A fallen branch, an unexpected pattern in the clouds, a sudden encounter with water glinting in sunlight, these became catalysts, triggers for reflection and release. Laughter transformed perception, revealing the beauty and absurdity of existence simultaneously. It was both a mirror and a magnifier, enhancing his awareness of the world while revealing the inner landscapes of his own mind. Solitary laughter also carried a profound psychological function. In a world of constant threat and uncertainty, it became a form of resilience. Fear and danger were omnipresent, storms could sweep across valleys, predators could strike without warning, and scarcity was a constant companion. Yet laughter offered a refuge, a temporary suspension of the harsh realities of existence. It was a private celebration, a way to assert agency in a world where survival often demanded compliance with instinct. By laughing alone, he claimed a small sovereignty over life, affirming that consciousness and joy could persist even amid the starkest adversity. There was a rhythm to his solitary laughter, a cadence that matched the pulse of his environment. It was not loud or boisterous, but soft, deliberate, attuned to the subtleties of sound and space. Sometimes it emerged in the morning mist, when the forest was quiet and the air carried a crystalline clarity. Sometimes it arose at dusk, as shadows lengthened and the first stars blinked awake. The timing of his laughter mirrored the cycles of nature, a quiet acknowledgement that he was not separate from the world, but woven into its perpetual motion. Yet even in solitude, laughter hinted at the social mind within him. He imagined responses, ghostly echoes of absent companions. Perhaps another human, somewhere beyond the hills, might understand the source of this laughter. The thought alone was comforting, suggesting that connection was possible even without immediate evidence. Laughter became a form of rehearsal, a preparation for social interaction yet to come. It was a rehearsal not just of sound, but of empathy, of shared recognition, of the profound bonds that would define humanity for millennia. Philosophically, solitary laughter revealed a paradox. The profound aloneness of consciousness and the inherent sociality of mind are intertwined. He laughed because he was aware, and awareness is always relational, whether the relationship is with others, with the world, or with the self. His laughter was a statement, a mark of existence, a subtle defiance against the loneliness embedded in being. It affirmed that life could be celebrated without validation, that joy could emerge from understanding, and that consciousness itself could be a source of wonder even in isolation. Over time, solitary laughter became a guide, shaping his interactions with the environment and with others. It attuned him to nuance, to moments of beauty and danger alike. Laughter sharpened perception, highlighted patterns, and created a framework for reflection. It was, paradoxically, a form of companionship, a reminder that presence, both internal and external, is never truly absent. Every echo of laughter resonated through the landscape, connecting him invisibly to the cycles of life, to the pulse of the forest, and to the unseen witnesses that marked his journey. Ultimately, the man who laughed alone discovered that solitude and laughter were not opposites, but complementary. The act of laughing without audience was a meditation, a study of perception, an embrace of consciousness in its purest form. It was an acknowledgement that joy, observation, and reflection are deeply human experiences, independent of social validation. In this solitary laughter, he found clarity, humility, and freedom, a profound insight into the essence of existence, the beauty of consciousness, and the delicate balance between mind and world. Through solitary laughter, he connected with the infinite complexity of life. Every sound, every gesture, every ripple of understanding became part of a subtle dialogue between self, environment, and time itself. And in this dialogue, he found meaning, presence, and the quiet exhilaration of being fully alive. The man who laughed alone, yet was intimately, profoundly connected to everything around him. The forest itself was alive with stories, with whispers carried on the wind and shadows that flickered like memory across the moss-covered floor. Each tree, each rustle of leaves seemed to contain a fragment of something larger, something timeless. For the man who laughed alone, these echoes were more than sounds, they were conversations, invitations to witness the subtle interplay between life, time, and perception. Walking through this labyrinth of green, he became acutely aware of the invisible network that connected all living things, a web of sensation, sound, and motion that made the forest both intimate and infinite. The echoes of his laughter traveled far beyond the path he walked. Birds paused mid-flight, their wings catching the light as if listening. Small animals froze, their instincts tuned to the vibrations of the unseen. Even the trees seemed to respond, their leaves shivering with a delicate resonance that mirrored the rhythm of his own breath. In these moments, the forest and the man were engaged in a subtle symbiosis, a dance of sound and silence, presence and absence. Each echo became a reminder that life is not solitary, even in apparent isolation, connection pulses invisibly through the world. The man began to perceive the forest as both stage and companion. Every footfall, every movement produced responses, the crunch of twigs beneath his feet, the sway of branches overhead, the distant call of a predator or prey. He noticed the layering of sound, the low hum of insects, the rustle of undergrowth, the distant roar of water, the crackle of fallen wood. In this complexity, he discovered patterns, a rhythm that mirrored his own heartbeat, his own thought. The echoes through the forest became a mirror for consciousness itself, layered, responsive, and alive with meaning. Time seemed different in these moments. The usual markers of hours and days dissolved into cycles of sound and sensation. He measured passage not by the sun or moon but by the subtle shifts in echo and response, the way a bird's song would change as the day warmed, or how the wind carried different scents at different hours. The forest taught him patience, the quiet art of listening, of attuning himself to patterns invisible to those who moved too quickly or thought too narrowly. In this echoing world, he began to understand the deep intelligence of nature, a knowledge older than humans and yet intimately intertwined with their perception. There was an almost meditative quality to these interactions. He would pause mid-step, close his eyes, and listen. A ripple of wind through the ferns, a distant splash in the river, the sudden rustle of a deer, each sound became a focal point, a touchstone for awareness. Echoes were not merely acoustic, they were emotional and philosophical signals. They reflected impermanence and continuity, chaos and order, life and mortality. In their repetition and variation, he discerned the subtle heartbeat of the world, the invisible currents that shape existence in ways too complex to fully articulate. But these echoes were not always gentle. Sometimes the forest reminded him of its power, its danger. A sudden snap of a branch, the low growl of a predator, the distant crack of a falling tree, each could shift the entire rhythm of perception. Each echo carried a warning, a lesson in vigilance and humility. The man learned that connection to the world requires respect and attentiveness. Life's beauty is inseparable from its precariousness, and every sound in the forest held dual meaning, delight and caution, wonder and fear, presence and absence. These dualities were lessons in themselves, shaping his understanding of what it meant to be conscious, aware, and alive. The echoes also reflected memory. Certain sounds triggered recollections of distant moments, of other forests, other landscapes, other faces and experiences long past. A rustling branch might recall a childhood memory, a sudden bird call might echo an encounter with another human, a pattern of movement might bring forth recollections of a hunt. In this way, the forest became a living archive, preserving and projecting memory through sound, motion, and resonance. The man's laughter, too, contributed to this archive, embedding itself into the network of echoes and joining the ancient dialogue of the woodland world. Interestingly, he began to perceive the echoes as narrative. Each sound was a sentence, each rustle a paragraph, and the unfolding of moments became a story told not in words but in resonance. Predator and prey, growth and decay, water and wind, all conspired to tell a tale of survival, of interdependence, and of the delicate balance of life. The man who laughed alone realized that the forest was itself a storyteller, weaving complexity and meaning into every vibration, inviting him to listen deeply and to understand that his laughter was another thread in the ongoing narrative of existence. Philosophically, the echoes offered insight into the nature of perception. He discovered that sound, like thought, is never isolated, it reverberates, shaping and reshaping consciousness in response to both internal and external stimuli. His laughter, once private, now interacted with the world in subtle, profound ways. The forest became an extension of his mind, a mirror reflecting the interplay between self, environment, and time. Echoes taught him that life is a continuum, that awareness is relational, and that even solitary actions have ripple effects far beyond immediate perception. Over time, he began to anticipate the echoes, to move with their rhythm, to respond to them almost instinctively. This attunement heightened his sensory awareness, sharpened his reflexes, and deepened his emotional perception. He began to sense patterns not only in sound but in movement, in scent, in light and shadow. The forest became both classroom and companion, its echoes shaping his understanding of natural law, the flow of energy, and the interconnectedness of all life. He was no longer simply a solitary wanderer, he was a participant in an intricate, living symphony. Ultimately, the echoes through the forest taught him humility and reverence. They revealed the fragility of life, the fleetingness of experience, and the beauty of impermanence. They reminded him that every sound, every motion, every laugh, and every silence is part of a greater whole. Through attentive listening, through careful observation, through the interplay of laughter and echo, he discovered a profound truth: consciousness is not separate from the world but woven into its fabric, just as echoes are inseparable from the spaces that birth them. In the quiet aftermath of reflection, he laughed once more, softly, intentionally, and listened. The echoes returned, rippling across the forest floor, intertwining with the murmurs of life and the whispers of time. And in that moment, the man understood the subtle miracle of existence, that even in solitude, even in the vastness of a world unbound, connection is inevitable, awareness is profound, and the music of life continues, echoing endlessly through the corridors of both mind and forest. The man who laughed alone had learned to listen to the forest, but soon he realized that the true depth of understanding lay not only in sound but in sight. Eyes, he discovered, were not mere instruments for registering shapes or colors, they were windows into perception, tools for unraveling the mysteries of the world. He began to notice the subtle shifts in light, the trembling of leaves, the way shadows lengthened and shortened with time, and how even the smallest creature's movements could reveal hidden truths. Each glance became a lesson, each observation a meditation. The forest was no longer just a place of echoes, it was a living tapestry, and his eyes were the threads that connected him to its infinite details. At first, he focused on the obvious, the towering trees, the sun glinting on dew-soaked leaves, the path of the river carving its slow course through the land. But gradually, he learned to see what was hidden, what often went unnoticed. Tiny insects carrying droplets of water on their backs, fungi sprouting in precise geometric patterns, the subtle shimmer of a predator's gaze from afar, all of these details told stories of survival, adaptation, and interconnectedness. His vision became sharper, not just physically but mentally. He began to perceive relationships between things that had previously seemed unrelated, patterns that spoke of balance and design within apparent chaos. Eyes, he discovered, were more than a tool for survival, they were instruments of wonder. The way sunlight filtered through the canopy, scattering into intricate mosaics on the forest floor, revealed that beauty and complexity exist even in moments of apparent randomness. Each detail, when observed closely, contained layers of information. The curvature of a leaf could indicate seasonal change, the direction of a branch could hint at prevailing winds, the subtle behavior of a bird could signal the presence of predators nearby. Through patient observation, he learned to decode the forest, to read its signs as if it were a text written in light, shadow, and motion. This awareness changed the way he perceived himself. When his eyes absorbed the forest's details, he felt simultaneously immense and infinitesimal, vast in the sense that consciousness allowed him to take in the totality of the environment, yet infinitesimal because, in the grand scheme of time and nature, he was but a fleeting spark. His vision extended beyond the present moment into the realm of speculation and imagination, allowing him to glimpse the lives of creatures that had walked the forest long before him, and perhaps the echoes of those that would come after. To see was to enter a dialogue with time itself, and his eyes became instruments for conversing with both the past and the future. He began to notice motion in ways that went beyond simple observation. A rustle in the undergrowth was not merely a sound, it was a message. A darting flash of fur or a sudden bend of a branch was a signal, a story in miniature. He trained himself to track these movements with patience, letting his gaze linger until patterns emerged. Predator and prey engaged in a constant, silent negotiation, each aware of the other's presence, each influencing the ecosystem with every step. By seeing beyond the obvious, the man tapped into the silent choreography of life, discovering that vision, like thought, could uncover hidden layers of reality when exercised with discipline and care. The forest also revealed truths about perception itself. What one sees is never purely objective, it is filtered through expectation, memory, and emotion. The man realized that his eyes could deceive him, that shadows could suggest threats that were not there or conceal dangers lurking just beyond focus. Yet, in acknowledging these limitations, he learned the importance of humility. To truly see beyond, he had to reconcile subjective experience with objective reality, to balance wonder with caution, curiosity with respect. In this way, his eyes became not only tools for observation but instruments for self-reflection, mirrors of his own mind and consciousness. Eyes that see beyond, he discovered, could perceive not only form but intention. The glance of a bird, the stance of a deer, even the sway of the branches in the wind conveyed purpose. Nothing in nature existed randomly, every motion had cause and effect, every being acted in response to unseen pressures. By watching, he became attuned to this invisible language, a subtle interplay of instinct, survival, and environment. The man realized that understanding the world required more than knowledge, it demanded empathy, the capacity to inhabit the perspective of another being, to see through the eyes of those who could not speak yet communicated volumes through movement and gesture. With time, his vision became cinematic. He began to frame moments in his mind, to observe sequences as if they were scenes in an unfolding story. The sun dipping below the horizon, the mist rising from the river, the flicker of a fox's tail, each was a scene rich with narrative potential. The forest was no longer just a habitat, it was a storyteller, and his eyes were instruments of cinematic perception, capturing drama, suspense, and beauty with the same care a painter might devote to a canvas. Every glance held the possibility of revelation, every shift in light a chance to uncover a hidden layer of meaning. Philosophically, he began to understand that sight was intertwined with understanding. To see beyond was to perceive connections, to witness the hidden symphony of life, and to grasp one's place within it. His laughter, once solitary, now resonated within this visual tapestry, creating a bridge between observation and expression. The forest responded to his awareness, and he responded to its cues, forming a continuous feedback loop of perception and interpretation. Vision, in this sense, became not a passive reception of images but an active engagement with existence itself. By the end of his journey through this section of the forest, the man understood that to see beyond is to recognize the invisible threads that bind the world together. Every leaf, every ripple of water, every creature's gaze contributed to a living mosaic. He had learned that vision is both a tool and a responsibility, a gift that illuminates not only the external world but the inner landscape of consciousness. Eyes that see beyond reveal not only the mechanics of life, but its poetry, its philosophy, and its quiet, profound truths. And so, he paused, letting his gaze sweep across the forest, absorbing every detail with reverence. He understood now that seeing is an act of participation, that vision is inseparable from thought, empathy, and awareness. In the quiet intensity of this observation, he laughed once more, not alone this time, but in communion with the world around him, fully present, fully attentive, fully alive. Beyond the dense canopy and the quiet observation of the forest, the man discovered the river, a slow, meandering ribbon of water that seemed to carry not just fish and sediment, but memories of a world long past. It was a river that had witnessed centuries, even millennia, flowing through valleys carved by time itself. Its surface reflected the sky, the trees, and the man's own contemplative face, yet beneath the shimmer lay currents that told stories no eye could read without patience and reflection. The river became a mirror of eternity, a medium through which he could glimpse the invisible forces shaping both the land and himself. As he walked along its banks, he noticed how the river seemed to remember. The smooth stones beneath the water bore the marks of countless years, polished by ceaseless motion, shaped by forces that operated beyond human comprehension. He touched one, feeling the cool, wet surface beneath his fingers, and imagined the countless creatures that had crossed it, the humans who had drunk from it, the winds that had stirred its ripples, and the rains that had fed its flow. Each ripple was a memory, each eddy a story deferred but never forgotten. The river, he realized, was not merely water, it was history made liquid, a flowing chronicle of change and persistence. Time along the river was different. It moved at multiple speeds simultaneously, a paradox that both fascinated and unsettled him. He watched leaves drift slowly across the surface, carried by currents that seemed gentle but unstoppable, their journey inevitable yet unpredictable. The fish darted with sudden bursts of speed, a contrast to the languid drift of algae and fallen branches. In this interplay of motion, he glimpsed the dual nature of existence. Life could be both patient and urgent, both fleeting and eternal. To witness the river was to witness the contradictions of time itself, a lesson in impermanence and continuity, in loss and renewal. He began to meditate beside the water, listening not only to its sound but to its silence between waves, its pauses that held meaning. The river whispered of worlds long vanished, the forests that had once lined its banks, the creatures that had thrived and then disappeared, and the humans whose lives had briefly intersected with its flow. He imagined the footsteps of ancient travelers, their laughter and despair echoing faintly through the mist rising from the surface. By attuning himself to the river, he learned that the past is not entirely gone, it lingers in forms subtle and profound, waiting for those patient enough to perceive it. The river also taught him about the nature of persistence. Water never stopped moving, yet it adapted ceaselessly to the landscape. It carved canyons over millennia, nurtured life along its edges, and yet returned endlessly to the sea, completing a cycle that had no true beginning or end. In this, he found a reflection of his own solitary journey. Though he laughed alone and wandered paths few had trodden, he too was part of a cycle, a current in the larger river of time. His moments of solitude became analogous to the quiet eddies that hold water in place for a brief pause, a space for reflection before the next movement carries them onward. One day, as he sat watching the play of sunlight on the water, he realized that the river held a paradoxical gift. It was both constant and ever-changing. Its surface mirrored the world above, yet beneath lay hidden depths unknown to those who glanced only briefly. To truly understand the river, he needed patience, awareness, and a willingness to surrender to its flow. Similarly, life demanded the same virtues: to observe, to wait, to embrace uncertainty, and to recognize that the depth of understanding could only be achieved through immersion, through an intimate engagement with the present while acknowledging the past. He noticed the river's interactions with the land in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, the way sediment was deposited after a flood, the way branches and roots intertwined to form shelters for small creatures, the way the water slowly shaped cliffs and riverbanks. All of these dynamics revealed an ecosystem in delicate balance. The river did not rush for recognition, it simply acted, influencing everything around it through quiet persistence. This observation became a meditation on influence, patience, and humility. He understood that impact does not always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes the most profound changes occur through silent, sustained effort. The river also became a metaphor for memory and forgetting. As it flowed, it carried fragments of the past downstream, dispersing them into unknown directions. Some memories were preserved in the shape of stones, the grooves carved by water, or the fallen leaves caught in an eddy. Others disappeared completely, swallowed by currents and hidden beneath the surface. Yet even the forgotten fragments left traces, subtle echoes in the environment and in the consciousness of the man. He saw parallels in his own mind. Memories fade, but their effects linger, shaping perception, guiding intuition, and informing choices long after the original experience has vanished. Philosophically, the river challenged him to reconcile permanence and impermanence. He realized that his laughter, his solitude, and his observations were temporary, fleeting moments in the vast expanse of time. Yet, just as the river carried sediment to the sea and fed life along its banks, his experiences contributed to a larger flow, influencing things beyond his immediate perception. Life, he understood, is a river of action and consequence, a current in which individual existence is both small and significant, transient and enduring. By evening, the man often lingered on the banks, watching the sunset ignite the water with hues of gold, crimson, and violet. Shadows stretched across the ripples, merging with reflections of clouds, creating patterns that seemed almost intentional, like messages from time itself. He contemplated the river's endless journey, the countless cycles of life it had witnessed, and the way it had silently shaped the world. In its flow, he found both solace and inspiration, solace in its constancy, inspiration in its ceaseless motion. The river, he realized, was a teacher, in patience, observation, and perspective. To understand it, he had to watch, listen, and feel, allowing himself to be part of its rhythm. By doing so, he gained insight into the larger currents of life, the subtle interplay of history, environment, and consciousness. And in these quiet moments by the water, he laughed once more, not as a solitary echo, but as a participant in the timeless dance of existence, fully aware of his place in the endless river of forgotten time. Beyond the river, he ventured into the deeper forests where sunlight barely pierced the thick canopy and shadows seemed to whisper secrets older than any living memory. Here, the air carried a weight, a stillness that was almost audible. The forest itself felt alive, as though every leaf, branch, and root were participants in a silent symphony, a choir of existence that had persisted through countless ages. It was a soundless music, yet profound in its resonance, filling him with awe and a subtle, almost spiritual tremor. He realized that the world was speaking, not in words or laughter, but in the rhythms, patterns, and quiet harmonies of life itself. The birds, though hidden among the leaves, contributed their tentative notes to this vast composition. Their calls were irregular, fleeting, yet precise, messages carried across the dense forest to ears tuned to listen. The insects drummed in the background, their tiny wings and bodies producing rhythms that underpinned the larger cadence of the forest. Every footfall of small mammals, every rustle of hidden creatures, added texture and depth. This choir was ancient, continuous, and indifferent to human presence, yet its influence on the mind was undeniable. It spoke of survival, of the passage of time, and of the quiet persistence of life against overwhelming odds. He thought of the humans who had once walked these lands long before him. Their presence had been fleeting in the grand scale of evolution, yet they too had contributed to this choir, through tools struck against stone, through footsteps and firelight flickering in the darkness, through whispered stories passed across generations. Even in their absence, the echoes of their existence lingered, folded into the textures of the forest like notes in a melody no one could entirely decipher. In this realization, he felt both humbled and connected, a solitary figure in communion with a lineage that stretched back tens of thousands of years. The silence of the forest was deceptive. It was not emptiness but concentration, a stillness dense with latent energy. The man observed the moss-covered stones, the gnarled roots, the the decaying trunks of fallen trees. Each held a story, the slow consumption of life and death, the quiet reclamation of matter by nature, the constant negotiation of existence between species. He imagined the countless creatures who had moved through these same spaces, the predators, the prey, the scavengers, each contributing to a balance that was as fragile as it was enduring. The forest's choir was a testament to continuity, a music of survival, adaptation, and coexistence that had persisted without pause. He knelt by a patch of ground where ancient stones protruded, worn smooth by time. These stones had once marked sacred spaces, perhaps the resting places of those long gone or the sites of ritual and contemplation. He placed his hand upon one, feeling the subtle vibrations of energy passed through countless generations. In this contact, he sensed that the choir of the forest was not merely natural, it was cultural, layered with human memory as well as biological history. The song of the ancients was silent yet eternal, a confluence of evolution and humanity, teaching lessons in resilience, patience, and humility to those willing to listen. Nightfall brought a new movement to the choir. Crickets and nocturnal insects rose to prominence, their rhythmic sounds like percussion accompanying a slow, methodical symphony. Owls called out in intervals that seemed almost conversational, each echo a question met with silence and contemplation. Even the wind became part of the orchestra, threading through branches, stirring leaves, and creating a hushed chorus that resonated with the heartbeat of the forest. The man listened without interruption, letting the layers of sound wash over him, guiding him toward a meditative awareness of life as an intricate, interwoven phenomenon. In the darkness, he felt a profound connection to the concept of time itself. The choir of the ancients, though imperceptible to most, was a repository of history, a living archive that needed no words. Each sound was a record, each pause a lesson, and every pattern a reminder of impermanence and endurance. In the presence of such continuity, he laughed softly, not out of solitude, but in recognition of being part of something larger than his own fleeting existence. The universe, it seemed, had its own music, indifferent yet intimate, and he was both observer and participant. The forest also revealed the fragility of existence. He observed the delicate interactions among species, the predator that hunted silently, the prey that navigated danger with instinctual precision, the plants that thrived only with symbiotic companions nearby. Each life depended on countless others, an intricate choreography maintained by millions of unseen decisions. The silent choir of the ancients was therefore also a warning. Beauty and balance are neither permanent nor guaranteed. Life requires attention, respect, and a recognition of one's place within the delicate equilibrium. By the light of the moon, the man wandered deeper into the forest, guided by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant call of a night creature. Shadows shifted and danced, creating patterns that were both disorienting and mesmerizing. In this interplay of light and darkness, he contemplated the dualities inherent in existence, the known and the unknown, the visible and the hidden, the fleeting and the eternal. The forest's choir mirrored these dualities, reminding him that silence could be as communicative as sound, and absence could be as instructive as presence. In the stillness of the night, he began to understand the philosophy embedded in this natural music. Life is an accumulation of moments, each interdependent and fleeting, yet collectively capable of shaping meaning. The forest, in its timeless patience, had preserved these lessons for all who were willing to hear them. To laugh alone, he realized, was not a sign of isolation but of attunement, a conscious recognition of one's solitary role within a choir that has sung for eons and will continue long after any single life ends. He left the forest at dawn, carrying the resonance of the silent choir with him. Though his footsteps no longer stirred the symphony directly, the experience had altered his perception. He understood that life's true music exists in interactions, both seen and unseen, in persistence and impermanence, in attention and reverence. In the quiet laughter that escaped his lips, there was not emptiness but acknowledgement, an understanding that even a solitary human could participate in the grand composition of existence. After leaving the forest, he found himself standing at the edge of a vast, windswept plain. The morning sun stretched across the horizon, casting long, golden shadows that seemed to dance in silent memory of events long past. Here, the air was open and unbound, carrying whispers of lives that had once crossed this land. He could almost hear the laughter of those who had walked before him, a laughter unrestrained, ephemeral, yet deeply human. It was not cheerful in the ordinary sense, but poignant, tinged with the awareness of impermanence, of the inevitable passage of time. He thought of the man he once was and the man he would become. Laughter, he realized, was a fragile companion, easily lost in solitude, yet deeply resonant when it returned. The plain seemed to echo this duality, as though the earth itself remembered joy alongside sorrow. Each gust of wind carried stories of triumph and despair, of moments seized and moments missed. He could almost trace the footprints of those who had laughed and cried before him, their lives forming an invisible tapestry stitched into the soil. Their echoes lingered in a rhythm that transcended time, a reminder that every human experience, no matter how fleeting, left an imprint on the world. The man paused near a cluster of rocks, smooth and sun-warmed, and sat, letting the quiet of the plain envelop him. He reflected on loss, not only personal, but the collective loss embedded in history. Entire generations had vanished, leaving only fragments of culture, language, and memory behind. Yet in those fragments, life persisted. A song once sung, a tool once crafted, a story once told, these were forms of survival, whispers in the long, unbroken narrative of humanity. Laughter, too, was preserved in these echoes, a subtle defiance against the void. In this recognition, he understood that even solitude was an engagement with eternity. As he walked, the landscape shifted subtly. Small rivers carved their way across the plain, glinting like veins of silver in the morning light. The water whispered secrets of journeys and migrations, of creatures who had traversed these lands before humanity reached its prominence. The man imagined early humans observing these streams, pausing to drink, to fish, to reflect on the vastness of existence. He wondered if they had laughed at the same sky, at the same fleeting clouds, perhaps sensing the fragility of life and the beauty inherent in fleeting moments. Laughter, he realized, was both an act of joy and a confrontation with mortality. He came upon a grove of twisted trees, their bark scarred by time and weather. In their shadows, he imagined families and tribes huddled together, sharing warmth and stories in the long nights, the laughter of children, the teasing of companions, the quiet chuckle of elders. These echoes were woven into the fibers of the trees themselves, preserved as if the natural world sought to remember human emotion. Each laugh carried with it the weight of existence, the recognition that life was precarious, yet worthy of celebration. Loss, too, was present, interwoven with the joy, reminding all who listened that the passage of time was relentless and inevitable. The interplay of laughter and loss extended beyond humans alone. Animals, too, experienced moments of joy and sorrow, fleeting yet significant. He observed a herd of deer in the distance, their movement synchronized in silent harmony. The young leaped and gambled as if aware of their own ephemeral existence, while the elders moved with deliberate caution. In witnessing this, he felt a deep empathy, a recognition that the rhythm of life, punctuated by fleeting joy and unavoidable loss, was universal. Laughter and grief were inseparable partners, marking the same existence with contrasting colors, shaping the consciousness of all living beings. He began to trace the patterns left on the earth, depressions in the soil where humans had once knelt, remnants of fires that had warmed bodies and spirits, scattered tools that had shaped survival. Each artifact was a voice, a fragment of life, a whisper that insisted on being remembered. In these remnants, laughter persisted, not in sound, but in intent and presence. The echoes of moments lived fully, of curiosity indulged, of fear confronted with courage, were imprinted in these traces. The plain itself became a cathedral of memory, each stone, each blade of grass, a testament to the enduring human spirit. Time passed, as it always does, and the man's reflections deepened. He understood that loss was not only absence but also transformation. The death of an individual, the fall of a civilization, the fading of a tradition, all were catalysts for change, for the emergence of new patterns, new stories, new echoes. Laughter, too, evolved. It was not the same as it had been centuries ago, yet it remained recognizably human, a response to wonder, to surprise, to connection. In the interplay of laughter and loss, he discerned a philosophical truth. Life is a continuum, a series of echoes that, though altered over time, retain the essence of those who came before. As the sun reached its zenith, he noticed the subtle movements of the plain, the grasses bending in the wind, insects darting through the light, distant birds tracing arcs across the sky. Each movement was a rhythm, a part of the choir that connected him to everything around him. Laughter, he realized, was not merely an expression, it was an acknowledgement of existence, a recognition that even in solitude, one is part of something far greater. Loss, conversely, was the mirror of laughter, giving depth and contrast, reminding him that meaning was forged not in permanence but in awareness, attention, and presence. By evening, As shadows stretched long and the temperature cooled, he felt the weight of the day's reflections settling into his bones. He had traversed forests, plains, and memories, encountering the silent songs of life and the echoes of laughter and loss. He understood that his solitary laughter was not a sign of isolation but a resonance with the continuum of human experience, a momentary harmony with the countless voices that had come before. The plain, now bathed in the soft glow of dusk, seemed to exhale in quiet recognition, a world aware of its own beauty and transience. In the solitude of twilight, he allowed himself to smile, to laugh softly at the absurdity, the poignancy, and the grandeur of existence. The echoes of past laughter mingled with his own, weaving a tapestry that spanned generations. Loss remained present, a subtle undertone to the melody, yet it did not diminish the richness of the moment. He had become both witness and participant, listening to the eternal dialogue between joy and sorrow, laughter and silence. And in that recognition, he found a profound peace, a clarity that would guide him forward into the next chapter of his solitary journey. The horizon stretched endlessly, a pale wash of amber and rose, as if the world itself had been painted in muted tones of memory. He walked slowly, deliberately, over terrain that had been shaped by countless unseen hands, hands that tilled soil, hunted game, raised families, and carved out fleeting moments of beauty. Each step he took was a dialogue with the past, a quiet acknowledgement of those who had walked here long before him. The earth beneath his feet was not silent, it whispered through the grit of sand, the soft give of moss, and the gentle crunch of leaves underfoot, telling stories that had survived in fragments yet spoke with enduring clarity. He traced the ridges of a small valley, noticing patterns that repeated across the land, natural formations intertwined with human intervention, stones arranged in careful circles, depressions in the soil that hinted at dwellings long forgotten, and faint trails worn into the earth by centuries of footsteps. Each imprint was a testament to resilience, to adaptation, and to the unrelenting curiosity of humankind. The land itself seemed alive with memory, holding the weight of countless lives, their joys, fears, and quiet triumphs interlaced with the rhythm of nature. In this way, the earth became both archive and storyteller, preserving whispers that had no voice but resonated nonetheless. As he walked, he reflected on the paradox of existence, the fleetingness of individual life against the backdrop of enduring landscapes. Mountains rose and fell, rivers shifted their courses, and yet the footprints of those who once traversed these plains were subtly etched into the continuum of time. He imagined a solitary hunter centuries ago, perhaps pausing to rest beside a river, glancing at the horizon, and feeling the same combination of awe and vulnerability that now stirred within him. What stories had they carried? What laughter? What sorrow had been left behind in their transient passage? He felt connected to them not as a mere observer, but as part of a lineage that had learned to navigate the delicate balance between survival and wonder. The wind carried scents of earth and water, of plants pressed into memory by seasons long gone. He inhaled deeply, allowing the aroma to guide him back through imagined centuries. Along the banks of a meandering stream, he pictured early humans kneeling to drink, dipping hands into cool, flowing water, and pausing to listen to the soft chorus of life that surrounded them. Birds called across the valley, insects hummed, and the distant rustle of foliage suggested the careful movements of prey or predator. Every sound, every movement, was a fragment of the ecological symphony that had cradled human existence. In these moments, he understood that life had always been intertwined with observation and reverence, a silent negotiation between being and environment. Footsteps, he realized, were more than physical movements. They were records of thought, choice, and intention. Each imprint on the earth carried evidence of decision-making, a path chosen to avoid danger, a detour taken to explore, a pause to contemplate. These impressions were ephemeral, yet they left traces that could endure far longer than the brief span of a single life. In walking this ancient land, he became a participant in an ongoing conversation, adding his own steps to the layered record of human curiosity and persistence. Each footprint was both evidence of presence and an acknowledgement of absence, a marker of continuity in the ever-shifting tapestry of time. He came upon a series of rocks, smoothed by centuries of wind and rain, and paused to examine them. Some were etched with primitive symbols, lines, dots, spirals, that hinted at early attempts to communicate, to record, to leave a message for those who might come after. Though their meaning was lost to time, the intention remained palpable. They were markers of consciousness, small yet profound gestures that bridged the gap between the ephemeral human experience and the enduring world. He ran his fingers lightly across the grooves, imagining the hand that had carved them, the mind that had conceived them, and the world that had provided both canvas and context. In this tactile engagement with history, he felt a profound connection to the continuum of thought and creativity that defined humanity. As he continued across the plain, he became aware of the rhythm of his own journey, the sound of feet on earth, the subtle shift in balance with each step, the breath that accompanied movement. It was a rhythm mirrored in countless generations, a tempo of exploration and adaptation. He imagined children running along these same paths, their laughter piercing the air, marking joy and freedom in ways that were as old as memory itself. He thought of elders walking more slowly, imparting wisdom with each deliberate stride, teaching the young the patterns of the land, the signs of danger, and the nuances of survival. Every footfall was layered with meaning, a silent testimony to the interplay of life, learning, and legacy. The sun climbed higher, casting stark contrasts across the terrain, revealing hidden details, a fallen branch that once sheltered a small creature, a patch of moss indicating moisture and life, a ripple in the soil marking the passage of a predator. These small elements told stories as vividly as any written record. He recognized that history was not only contained in artifacts or texts but also embedded in the physical world, a living archive of experience. To walk this land was to read a narrative that demanded patience, attention, and reverence. It required a recognition that even the smallest detail, when observed carefully, could illuminate profound truths about survival, adaptation, and the interconnectedness of life. By afternoon, he reached a gentle rise overlooking a valley carved by time and memory. From this vantage, he could see the subtle traces of migration, the faint curves of paths long abandoned, and the echoes of human presence etched into the landscape. Each footprint he had left now joined countless others, invisible yet enduring, part of an unbroken chain stretching across millennia. The realization was humbling. Human life, in all its fleeting moments of joy, fear, and curiosity, was inseparable from the earth itself. Footsteps were more than movement, they were declarations of existence, testimonies of consciousness, and invitations to reflection. As dusk approached, he slowed, sensing the weight of history pressing gently against him. Shadows lengthened, and the terrain softened in the fading light. The land seemed to breathe with memory, carrying the silent chorus of those who had come before. His footsteps, once deliberate, became contemplative, a meditation on the interplay between presence and absence, action and reflection. Each step was a dialogue with the forgotten earth, a way of listening to the whispers of countless lives that had shaped the world he now traversed. He felt both humbled and empowered, part of a lineage of explorers, thinkers, and dreamers whose lives, though long vanished, continued to resonate through time. By nightfall, he paused at the crest of the hill, gazing at the valley below. The first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, and a profound silence settled over the land. His footsteps, echoing softly in memory, had become more than movement. They were a bridge across time, connecting him to the continuum of life that had preceded and would succeed him. In that quiet moment, he understood that the earth held more than history. It held the essence of humanity itself, preserved in the rhythm of footsteps across forgotten earth. And in this understanding, he found a sense of belonging, a quiet affirmation that to walk thoughtfully was to honor both the past and the potential of the future. As twilight deepened, the land seemed to exhale, releasing the warmth of the day into the cool embrace of night. He paused at the edge of a shallow ravine, eyes tracing the contours of rocks, roots, and soil. Here, he realized, memory was not written in ink or carved into stone. It was embedded in the very fabric of the world, a tapestry woven by the silent architects who had shaped it long before words could describe them. Every mound of earth, every gnarled tree, every meandering stream was a monument to life, to labor, to the persistence of species across eons. These were the creators of memory, not celebrated in chronicles or stories, yet their influence was undeniable, etched into every shadow and every shimmer of light that danced across the terrain. The wind carried whispers of time, faint yet insistent, reminding him that the world had been molded by countless hands and paws, claws and hooves. From the tiniest insects burrowing into the soil to the great beasts that once roamed these plains, every movement had left a trace. He imagined the meticulous work of generations of humans shaping their environment, building shelters from stone and timber, clearing fields, planting seeds, and tracking animals. Yet these acts, though practical, transcended utility. They were expressions of foresight, creativity, and the desire to leave a mark, however impermanent. In this light, the silent architects were more than mere laborers. they were philosophers, artists, and visionaries whose medium was the living world. He knelt beside a moss-covered stone, brushing away decades of detritus. The contours suggested deliberate placement, a careful alignment that hinted at intention and understanding. What had motivated these early architects? Was it survival alone, or was there a deeper impulse, a drive to communicate across time, to leave a fragment of themselves in a world that would inevitably outlast them? These questions did not require answers. Their power lay in the act of contemplation itself. By observing the subtle geometry of the land, he connected with minds long gone, sensing their curiosity, their frustrations, and the quiet triumphs that had defined their existence. Memory, he realized, was not a static ledger but a living conversation between past and present. Above him, the first stars flickered into view, their light distant yet immediate, touching the earth in invisible threads. He felt the presence of the unseen architects around him, not as ghosts, but as continuations of life's enduring pulse. They had built homes, cleared paths, and fashioned tools with intention and care, often knowing that their efforts would vanish, leaving only faint echoes in soil and stone. Yet these echoes mattered. They formed the groundwork of civilization, the foundation of understanding, and the scaffolding upon which future generations would rise. The invisible labor of these silent architects was profound, a testament to the human drive to shape the world even in the absence of recognition. He imagined a group of early humans working in synchrony by firelight, shaping stones into implements, reinforcing shelters, and learning to read the patterns of the land. Each gesture was deliberate, yet each was infused with imagination, problem-solving, and reflection. Their lives, though fleeting, were connected to a larger rhythm, a continuum of creation and adaptation. In their labor, he recognized a kind of quiet artistry, movements that were functional yet resonant, gestures that spoke to both necessity and aesthetic sensibility. These silent architects had no audience beyond the immediate circle of their companions, yet their work reverberated through time, invisible threads linking them to the present. Memory, he realized, was layered. There was the memory of events, encoded in experience, and there was the memory of the environment, encoded in matter itself. Stones, soil, water, and vegetation held imprints of activity, subtle signs that could be read by those attuned to the language of the land. Each pattern revealed stories of triumph and struggle, of curiosity and caution. A fallen branch suggested shelter or obstacle. A shallow depression might indicate a resting place or a forgotten dwelling. To walk these lands was to engage in archaeology of the senses, to read the accumulated labor of generations and to comprehend life in both its fragility and resilience. He wandered along the bank of a stream, watching the gentle ripple of water as it traced a path carved centuries before. The current seemed both ephemeral and eternal, reminding him that memory is not only preserved in form but also in motion. The water carried stories downstream, shaping the land and interacting with all who touched it. He considered how humans had always understood this, learning to read rivers as both resource and narrative, recognizing the subtle shifts that indicated abundance or danger. The silent architects had left guides embedded in the landscape, and those who could interpret them were rewarded with insight, sustenance, and connection. As darkness settled, the valley transformed into a cathedral of shadows and light, the stars above reflecting in pools of water and glistening on dew-covered leaves. He felt the enormity of time pressing gently against him, the countless lives, the unrecorded stories, the quiet labor that had shaped every hill and hollow. Yet he also felt a profound kinship, a sense that the architects were not absent but present in the patterns they had created. Every footprint, every stone alignment, every small mark on the earth was a dialogue, an invitation to witness, understand, and carry forward the essence of their work. In these moments, he understood that architecture of memory was not only about survival or practical need, it was about imprinting intention onto the world, leaving fragments of consciousness behind. Even when invisible to the casual observer, these traces carried profound significance, bridging the ephemeral and the eternal. They invited reflection, sparked imagination, and nurtured a deep awareness of the interconnectedness of life, land, and thought. He recognized that the silent architects had accomplished something far greater than they might have imagined. They had created a canvas for future consciousness, a living record that transcended words and endured in quiet resilience. By nightfall, he stood once more on the ridge, gazing at the vast landscape beneath a sky full of stars. The silent architects had left their mark everywhere, subtle yet undeniable, shaping not just the physical world but the very rhythm of perception. He felt a deep reverence for their labor, understanding that memory, in its most profound form, was both tangible and intangible. It existed in earth and mind, in action and reflection, and in the continuous dialogue between past and present. As he took a final step, he carried with him the realization that to witness these traces was to honor them, to participate in the continuum they had set in motion, and to recognize the extraordinary resilience and creativity of human life, even in its quietest forms. The wind had shifted, carrying a crispness that hinted at the coming night. He walked slowly among the scattered remnants of the past, where earth had yielded its secrets in fragments of bone, stone, and ash. Each relic was a messenger from a distant time, whispering stories that had long since faded from memory yet persisted in the language of matter itself. The bones, in particular, seemed to hold a quiet authority, a testament to survival, struggle, and the indelible marks left upon the world by beings who had once walked these lands with purpose and curiosity. He knelt beside a half-buried femur, its surface polished by centuries of wind and soil. In its curvature and weight, he imagined the life it had supported, the careful movements, the moments of rest and exertion, the balance of strength and vulnerability that defined existence in that era. This was not mere anatomy, it was narrative encoded in calcium and marrow, a silent chronicle of living, of choices made in the shadow of predators, seasons, and circumstance. The bone resonated with history, and he felt as if by touching it he was momentarily bridging the expanse of millennia, sharing a fleeting connection with a life long extinguished yet still speaking. Beyond individual fragments, the landscape itself seemed to echo with collective memory. Fossilized teeth hinted at diets and habits, vertebrae spoke of movement and endurance, skulls reflected intellect, expression, and social complexity. Every bone was a vessel of knowledge, a tangible link to experiences otherwise lost to the erosion of time. He considered the ancestors who had shaped their environment, their survival strategies intertwined with the land, and realized that the echoes in these bones were not simply of death, but of life lived with intention, resilience, and adaptation. He imagined the rhythmic cadence of prehistoric life, the subtle conversations between predator and prey, the meticulous gathering of food, the silent watch over vulnerable young. In this imagined theater, each creature played a role, each movement contributing to an intricate web of existence. The bones were the residual score of that performance, each fracture, groove, and erosion a note in a symphony that spanned ages. And though the actors had vanished, the echoes remained, resonating not only in the material world but in the consciousness of those willing to listen. Among the ruins, he noticed patterns in the arrangement of bones and tools, subtle signs of intentionality that hinted at ritual, care, or curiosity. There was an unmistakable rhythm in the remnants of habitation, the clustering of stones near hearths, the alignment of skeletal fragments, the choice of locations for burial or shelter. These were echoes of cognition, evidence that early humans perceived themselves not merely as observers of the world but as active participants, capable of reflection, planning, and symbolic thought. Memory, he realized, was preserved not only in stories or artifacts but in the very structure of life itself, in the careful choreography of daily existence. The silence around him deepened, inviting contemplation. In the stillness, he felt the weight of countless generations pressing lightly yet insistently against his awareness. Each fragment, each fossil, was a testament to persistence, a declaration that life, no matter how fragile, had been deliberate, meaningful, and interconnected. He traced a finger along the grooves of a weathered femur, imagining the stride it had once carried, the journeys it had endured, the companions it had accompanied. In that moment, time itself seemed to bend, allowing him to perceive life across millennia as though it were a continuous thread, unbroken and vibrant. He reflected on the philosophical implications of these echoes. Bones were more than historical artifacts, they were mirrors of identity, markers of experience, and conduits of empathy. To study them was to confront mortality, to witness the impermanence of individual life, yet the enduring continuity of existence. The silent narratives embedded in each fragment were reminders of both vulnerability and resilience, of the interplay between circumstance and agency, of the profound intelligence embedded in instinct, adaptation, and survival. Through these echoes, he understood the paradox of life, fleeting, yet eternal in its imprint, fragile, yet astonishingly resilient. As twilight deepened into night, he walked among the bones with a sense of reverence, feeling the layers of time settle around him like a gentle cloak. Each fossil, each fragment of life, was a teacher, a guide to understanding the rhythms of existence. He imagined the ancestors who had once carried these bones as living creatures, whose footsteps and decisions had left impressions not only in the earth but in the genetic and cultural legacy of humanity. The echoes were persistent, patient, waiting for those who would pause long enough to hear them, to contemplate their significance, and to honor the continuity they represented. Above, the first stars began to pierce the indigo sky, their light reflecting faintly in the curves and hollows of skeletal remains. He saw a profound symmetry in this juxtaposition, bones of the past, grounded firmly in the soil, while stars traced arcs of eternity above. Both were markers of time, both carriers of memory, both reminders that life existed within vast cycles far beyond the comprehension of any single individual. Yet, in witnessing them together, he felt a sense of intimacy with the cosmos, a quiet kinship with all life that had preceded him and with the infinite possibilities of those yet to come. He lingered near a partially unearthed skull, tracing the contours of its face and imagining the stories it could tell. Perhaps it had belonged to a hunter who tracked herds across open plains, or a caretaker who tended to the sick and young, or an observer who marveled at the changing sky. Whatever its life, the skull conveyed both the uniqueness of an individual and the universality of human experience. Each echo embedded within the bones was a reflection of memory, a reminder that even in absence, life asserts its presence, leaving behind traces that demand reflection, empathy, and wonder. As he stood to leave, he felt the quiet intensity of the echoes linger. The bones of the past were not inert. They were active participants in a dialogue that spanned ages, inviting the living to pause, observe, and understand. He carried with him a profound appreciation for the continuity of life, the persistence of memory, and the remarkable intelligence embedded not just in human hands but in the entirety of the living world. In the silent chorus of bones, he had found both history and philosophy, science and poetry, mortality and transcendence, all entwined in the fragile yet enduring architecture of life itself. As dawn crept over the horizon, a soft haze settled across the open plains, and he paused to consider not the world outside but the vast, untamed landscape within, the wilderness of the mind. In every human, he reflected, there exists an inner terrain as complex and unpredictable as the forests, rivers, and mountains that had shaped their ancestors' lives. Thoughts, memories, fears, and desires form shifting pathways as intricate and elusive as any animal trail, as expansive and mysterious as the night sky. The mind, he realized, is both sanctuary and labyrinth, a place where survival instincts and curiosity intersect, where imagination can soar or falter, and where the echoes of ancient experiences linger, subtly guiding perception and behavior. He envisioned early humans encountering this inner wilderness, though they may not have called it by any name. Their minds were not blank slates but fertile grounds, receptive to the constant stimuli of the environment, light and shadow, predator and prey, hunger and companionship. Within this mental terrain, they mapped not only the world but also themselves, learning the contours of fear and courage, desire and restraint, memory and expectation. Every choice, every emotion was a negotiation between instinct and reflection, a balancing act that shaped identity and determined survival. To understand the mind's wilderness is to understand the delicate interplay between external circumstance and internal consciousness, between the tangible world and the intangible currents of thought. He walked slowly along a narrow path, imagining the first flickers of introspection, moments when a hunter paused not merely to observe prey but to ponder, to anticipate, to strategize. Perhaps there was wonder as well, a gaze lifted toward the stars, a fleeting awareness of mortality, an instinctive curiosity about the forces that governed life and death. These early contemplations were seeds, subtle and unremarkable at first, yet pregnant with the potential for profound understanding. The wilderness of the mind, he mused, is defined by these seeds, flashes of insight, reflections on self and society, and the persistent, quiet questioning that drives both survival and civilization. Within this mental landscape, fear held a special domain. It was not merely a reaction to immediate danger but a complex force that shaped perception, memory, and decision-making. Fear could sharpen senses, focus attention, and compel caution, yet it could also paralyze, distort reality, and isolate the individual from the community. He imagined a solitary hunter standing at the edge of a cliff, heart pounding, aware of both the predator below and the precariousness of existence itself. The wilderness of the mind amplified every whisper, shadow, and instinct, and yet it also held the possibility of courage, insight, and creative problem-solving. It was here, in this internal expanse, that humanity first wrestled with its own potential and its own limitations. Memory, he realized, was the guiding compass of this wilderness. Each recalled event was a landmark, each learned skill a mapped route through the mental terrain. Early humans relied on memory not only to survive but to transmit knowledge across generations, to teach, to warn, to inspire. Memory transformed the mind from a reactive wilderness into a cultivated landscape, where patterns could be recognized, strategies refined, and imagination cultivated. He thought of the stories whispered around fires, passed from elder to youth, weaving together experiences, beliefs, and philosophies. These narratives were more than entertainment, they were cognitive tools, mental maps that guided perception and action in a world both beautiful and perilous. He paused beneath the first light of the sun, reflecting on the emotional topography of the mind. Joy and grief, hope and despair, trust and suspicion, all were features of this inner wilderness, shaping behavior and perception with subtle insistence. Emotions are both anchors and compasses, he realized, binding individuals to their environment, their community, and their sense of self. They can illuminate the landscape, revealing hidden paths and dangers, or they can obscure vision, creating illusions and misjudgments. The human mind, in its wilderness, is a delicate ecosystem where instinct, memory, imagination, and emotion interact continuously, producing not only survival strategies but the foundations of culture, creativity, and philosophy. Imagination, perhaps, is the most mysterious inhabitant of this wilderness. It allows the mind to traverse time and space, to envision futures not yet realized and pasts not directly experienced. He imagined early humans sitting quietly by their fires, envisioning hunts yet to come, reflecting on decisions already made, and dreaming of forces beyond comprehension, spirits, ancestors, or celestial patterns. Imagination transformed the wilderness from a place of reaction to a place of creation, allowing humans to construct meaning, to speculate, and to empathize. The mind, he understood, is as much a canvas as it is a battlefield, capable of generating beauty, wisdom, and terror alike. He considered the philosophical implications. The mind's wilderness is both a mirror and a map. It reflects the complexity of the external world while offering a framework for interpreting, understanding, and influencing it. Consciousness itself is a frontier, vast and largely uncharted, shaped by evolution, experience, and reflection. Within it reside the seeds of identity, morality, creativity, and contemplation. The mental wilderness is a testament to both fragility and resilience, a landscape where every thought is an act of exploration and every memory a path toward insight. As the day matured, he wandered through the imagined forests, rivers, and plains of his mind, guided by curiosity, observation, and reflection. He recognized that every human, whether hunter or philosopher, carries a wilderness within, a domain that must be navigated with patience, awareness, and humility. To explore it is to confront fear, to understand desire, to cultivate empathy, and to glimpse the interconnectedness of all life. The mind, he realized, is a terrain as rich and unpredictable as any prehistoric landscape, offering lessons not only in survival but in the profound art of being alive. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, he paused on a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of imagined mental terrain. The wilderness of the mind, with all its complexity and mystery, seemed to stretch infinitely, reflecting both the outer world and the inner self. It is a place of struggle and insight, of fear and courage, of imagination and memory. And in contemplating it, he felt a deep kinship with every human who had come before and with every mind yet to emerge. The wilderness is eternal, he thought, not in its chaos, but in its capacity to contain wonder, reflection, and the enduring spark of consciousness. In the quiet moments, when the world seems to hold its breath, he became aware of the subtle rhythm that underlies all life, the pulse, the heartbeat, the almost imperceptible cadence that marks existence itself. It is in these pauses, these silences between heartbeats, that the depth of life becomes palpable. The universe, with all its chaos, its storms and calms, seems to fold inward, focusing attention on the fragile, luminous thread of consciousness that binds body and mind, thought and perception, survival and reflection. Each heartbeat is a reminder of continuity, yet the silence that follows offers space for introspection, wonder, and revelation. He imagined early humans attuned to these rhythms, living in close communion with the natural cadence of the world around them. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of predators, the whisper of wind through grass, they were all part of a symphony of life that demanded attention and respect. Yet within that symphony existed a quieter undertone, the inner rhythm that signaled life itself. To hear it, to recognize it, is to connect with the essence of being, to feel oneself as both participant in and observer of the unfolding narrative of existence. It is a silence rich with meaning, a stillness that allows insight, and a pause in which the mind can wander freely, tracing the delicate interplay of instinct, memory, and imagination. In the vast plains of his imagination, he pictured the solitary figure of a hunter at dusk, standing motionless, listening. The world seemed to slow as if in empathy with the rhythm of his own heart. The hunter's breath became a metronome, each inhalation and exhalation aligning with the subtle shifts in the landscape, the sway of tall grasses, the distant movement of animals, the slow drift of clouds across the sky. In this suspended moment, the hunter was acutely aware not only of the external world but also of the intricate mechanics of his own body. The silence between heartbeats became a bridge, linking awareness to survival, reflection to intuition, and self to environment. He contemplated the emotional weight of these silences. In solitude, the mind can amplify both fear and awe. Each pause between heartbeats holds the possibility of revelation and danger alike. The stillness forces confrontation with oneself, with desires, regrets, and fleeting thoughts that often go unnoticed in the clamor of everyday life. In these gaps, the mind becomes a mirror, revealing truths otherwise hidden, illuminating patterns in behavior, and offering glimpses of deeper understanding. The human experience, he realized, is composed not only of action and reaction but also of these quiet interludes, these liminal spaces where reflection and awareness blossom. There is also a spiritual dimension to these silences, a sense of connection to something far greater than the self. He envisioned early humans observing the heavens, recognizing the cyclical patterns of day and night, the migration of stars, and the quiet insistence of the moon. In those moments, the mind extends beyond the immediate, bridging the gap between personal experience and the vastness of existence. The silence between heartbeats becomes a meditation, a conduit for contemplation, and a reminder of humanity's place within the broader cosmos. Life, in its most profound sense, is defined not only by the actions we take but by our awareness of the spaces in between, the invisible threads that bind thought, emotion, and perception. Even in danger, this silence holds significance. The hunter stalking prey or evading predators relies on the awareness that arises in these brief, delicate intervals. The pause between beats allows for recalibration, assessment, and intuition, sharpening senses beyond the limits of conscious calculation. It is a moment of clarity, born not from intellect alone but from the fusion of body, mind, and environment, a subtle harmony forged over millennia of survival. Each heartbeat, and the stillness that follows, encodes a lesson in patience, observation, and attentiveness. He pondered the psychological resonance of these moments. Humans are creatures attuned to rhythm, pattern, and timing. Music, ritual, and storytelling all echo the cadence of the heartbeat, reinforcing the connection between physical and emotional experience. In the silence between beats, emotions are intensified, thoughts crystallize, and imagination gains clarity. It is here, in this almost imperceptible interval, that introspection reaches its purest form, where awareness of self and world can merge, and where the mind can explore the ineffable dimensions of existence. The quiet is not empty, it is charged with potential, a fertile space for discovery, reflection, and understanding. Memory, too, finds its voice in these silences. The mind recalls moments of joy, fear, loss, and triumph, threading them together in a subtle narrative that defines identity. Each heartbeat punctuates this story, while the space between allows reflection and assimilation. He envisioned generations of humans pausing in forests, caves, and plains, listening to the rhythm of their own lives, letting memory and instinct intertwine. These intervals between action and thought, between stimulus and response, are as essential to survival as the pulse itself, shaping decisions, behavior, and understanding of the world. There is beauty in the quiet that is often overlooked. In a world dominated by noise, haste, and distraction, the silence between heartbeats is a sanctuary. It offers respite, clarity, and perspective. The hunter standing alone at twilight, the thinker lost in contemplation, or the child staring skyward, all experience this sacred pause, each in their own way discovering the profound simplicity of being present. Within this silence, one can sense the continuity of life, the connection to ancestors, and the fragile wonder of consciousness itself. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, he reflected on the ultimate philosophical significance. Life is measured not only in actions, triumphs, or failures, but also in the silences that punctuate it. The spaces between heartbeats are reminders of impermanence, awareness, and the profound complexity of existence. They are invitations to mindfulness, curiosity, and contemplation. To embrace these moments is to honor both the fleeting and enduring aspects of life, to navigate the tension between vulnerability and resilience, and to perceive the subtle symphony that underlies the human experience. Finally, in the stillness of dusk, he allowed himself to merge with the rhythm of the world, feeling the gentle undulations of breath and heartbeat as part of the eternal dance. The silence between heartbeats, he understood, is not emptiness but a profound presence, a liminal space where reflection, wonder, and insight coexist. It is a quiet sanctuary, a rhythm of being, and a timeless lesson in the art of perceiving life, deeply, patiently, and fully. In the recesses of memory, laughter has a peculiar way of lingering, like sunlight refracted through mist. It carries within it fragments of joy, sorrow, relief, and recognition, a subtle resonance that binds moments together across time. For him, laughter was not merely a reaction, it was a language, a signal, a mirror reflecting the inner life of humanity. Even in solitude, the echoes of laughter, both his own and that of those long gone, remained, curling softly around the edges of thought, reminding him of connection, of the fragile threads that link individual consciousness to the collective experience. He thought of the earliest humans huddled around flickering fires, sharing stories that danced between fear and humor. The laughter that escaped them in those moments was not trivial, it was essential. It diffused tension, strengthened bonds, and offered a fleeting sense of transcendence beyond survival. Each chuckle, each burst of unrestrained sound, echoed across the landscape, marking a claim on the present, asserting the presence of mind and spirit amidst the relentless demands of existence. Even in the harshest winters, the darkest nights, or when hunger gnawed at the body, laughter persisted, a defiant affirmation of life. The peculiar nature of laughter is that it is both ephemeral and enduring. A single moment of mirth can resonate for years in memory, shaping perspective and softening the edges of pain. He recalled instances in his own life when laughter emerged unexpectedly, in places of solitude or tension, breaking the heavy silence with a sound that seemed to belong simultaneously to the past, present, and future. It is in these moments that one realizes laughter is not merely expression but a form of preservation, a way to imprint joy upon the passing moments and to allow human experience to echo beyond the boundaries of time. In the solitude of his thoughts, he considered the paradoxical nature of laughter. It is intensely social, yet deeply personal. It unites and separates, heals and exposes. The sound itself is fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appears, yet its memory can linger indefinitely, carrying with it warmth, nostalgia, and insight. There is a philosophical dimension here. Laughter embodies impermanence, yet asserts the persistence of the self. It is both a fleeting spark and a lasting imprint, illuminating the continuity of consciousness, the capacity for reflection, and the essential human need for expression. He imagined prehistoric landscapes, the wind sweeping across plains, the shadows stretching across caves, and within these settings, laughter as a subtle but powerful force. The sound would ripple through the air, small yet potent, carrying meaning beyond words. Perhaps a hunter, returning with a successful kill, shared a knowing smile and a laugh with companions. Perhaps children, playing on the edge of the forest, erupted in mirth that resonated with the rhythm of life itself. Each laugh was an affirmation of presence, a temporary bridge across the isolation inherent in individual consciousness. It was a reminder that even amidst struggle, delight can persist, unbounded and alive. There is also a melancholic quality to laughter remembered. Some laughter is lost, forgotten, or never shared. It resides only in memory, haunting in its absence. He understood that his own solitary laughter carried shadows of those who could no longer join him, of lives that had flickered briefly and gone. Yet even in absence, the echoes remained meaningful. They formed an invisible tapestry, linking him to humanity's collective past, to the unspoken truths of survival, joy, and resilience. The faint echoes of forgotten laughter are not empty, they are imprints of life, resonant with significance, a testament to the enduring human spirit. The physiological and psychological dimensions of laughter fascinated him. In its expression, the body releases tension, regulates stress, and stimulates pathways in the mind that connect thought, memory, and emotion. Laughter is simultaneously primal and refined, a vestige of evolutionary necessity that evolved into a medium for subtle communication, bonding, and play. Anthropologists speculate that laughter served to reinforce social cohesion, to signal safety in groups, and to calibrate emotional understanding among individuals. In every chuckle, every silent giggle, there is an echo of that ancient function, a reminder that humans are creatures not only of logic and survival but of nuance, humor, and relational complexity. Yet laughter is rarely simple. It carries contradictions. It can soothe or mock, release or obscure, illuminate or distract. He reflected on how laughter could expose vulnerability while providing cover, how it could both deepen connection and signal distance. In solitude, this duality becomes more apparent. Without an audience, laughter transforms into memory, imagination, and reflection. It is here that the human mind discovers its own resonance, its own capacity for joy even in isolation, and its own ability to weave meaning from ephemeral moments. He considered the philosophical significance of laughter's persistence across time. Every human life contains these flickers, brief yet profound, and they collectively form a subtle rhythm within the narrative of existence. Even when joy seems scarce, or life unbearably heavy, the memory of laughter, the potential for it, serves as a quiet anchor, a reminder of resilience, of creativity, and of the intangible threads that bind people across generations. It is in these echoes that the human spirit finds continuity, hope, and a sense of belonging that transcends the immediate moment. Finally, he realized that laughter, whether shared or solitary, remembered or imagined, constitutes a kind of immortality. The echoes of forgotten laughter are more than mere memory. They are a living testament to the fleeting, luminous quality of life itself. They remind him that joy, even if transient, has weight, meaning, and resonance. That even in solitude, even in silence, there exists the potential for delight, recognition, and communion with all that has come before. In every remembered chuckle, in every imagined burst of mirth, he encountered humanity itself, vulnerable, fleeting, enduring, and alive. Night has always carried a particular weight, a gravity that bends time and perception, blurring the lines between reality and imagination. For him, it was in these hours of darkness that the laughter, both his own and that of others long gone, took on a different resonance. It became a ghostly presence, drifting through the stillness, a reminder of moments both joyous and unsettling. The night amplifies memory, the mind's theater, lit by faint recollections and laughter, unexpected, lingering, can haunt with the intensity of a living thing. It is not malevolent, nor wholly comforting. It exists in the liminal space where wonder and unease intertwine, leaving traces upon the soul that are at once beautiful and unnerving. He remembered the nights of his youth when the boundaries between day and dream were porous, and laughter could erupt with startling clarity. The sound, sometimes muffled, sometimes sharp, seemed to echo from other times, other lives, as though the night itself carried the residual energy of human expression. In prehistoric times, the night was a realm of heightened vulnerability. Shadows shifted and danced, predators prowled, and survival demanded vigilance. Yet, even amidst danger, laughter could emerge, an unexpected defiance, a spark of humanity asserting itself against the dark. In this context, laughter was not merely amusement, it was courage, signaling resilience, presence, and the refusal to be consumed by fear. He pondered how laughter in the quiet of night could transform perception. A solitary laugh might echo through a cave, across empty plains, or within the narrow confines of a forest glade, altering the way one experiences space and time. It has the power to shift attention, to punctuate stillness with rhythm and vitality, and to anchor the wandering mind. In solitude, this resonance becomes intimate, almost sacred, revealing hidden depths of memory and imagination. Night's shadows seem to carry it farther than daylight, amplifying its significance and lending it a weight that is both reflective and haunting. There is also a tension inherent in laughter at night. Unlike daytime humor, which is grounded in immediate social context, nighttime laughter often occurs without audience or explanation. It emerges spontaneously, sometimes at incongruous moments, echoing internal contradictions, joy within sorrow, playfulness amidst fear, relief tangled with anxiety. These sounds can linger in memory, growing in significance precisely because they are unbound from immediate circumstance. In recalling these nocturnal bursts of mirth, he felt the profound complexity of human experience, that delight and unease often coexist, that laughter can heal and unsettle simultaneously, and that solitude can reveal the mind's most intricate patterns of thought and emotion. In prehistoric communities, the night was equally transformative. Around the fire, storytelling intertwined with laughter, and the darkness beyond the circle became a canvas upon which imagination could roam freely. Laughter might punctuate tales of monsters, gods, or ancestral heroes, heightening the contrast between the known and the mysterious. Even when alone, an individual could remember or anticipate these sounds, carrying the emotional resonance of communal experience into solitary hours. The laughter of others, whether present or imagined, haunted the night in the sense that it bridged isolation, linking one to a larger, unseen network of human consciousness across time. He also reflected on the physiological responses to nighttime laughter. In darkness, sensory perception is heightened, and the brain responds differently to stimuli. The auditory memory of laughter can trigger waves of emotion, releasing tension while simultaneously stirring unease. There is a paradoxical interplay between the comfort of humor and the vulnerability inherent in solitude at night. Laughter becomes a conduit, connecting mind and body, past and present, imagination and reality. In this space, he discovered the haunting beauty of the human psyche, the capacity to evoke and sustain emotion in the absence of immediate stimuli, and the remarkable persistence of memory and sensation. The night's haunting laughter is not always literal. Often, it exists as impression, as shadow, as a trace in the mind that refuses to be ignored. It can emerge unexpectedly, triggered by a sound, a smell, a flicker of light, or the faintest recollection. These moments evoke both awe and anxiety, the thrill of recognition mingled with the unsettling sense that something essential has been revealed yet remains beyond comprehension. It is in these moments that one confronts the uncanny laughter, a symbol of life, pleasure, and connection, juxtaposed against darkness, silence, and the unknown. The tension itself becomes an experience, shaping perception and memory with a subtle, persistent intensity. He considered the philosophical dimensions of this nocturnal laughter. Why does it linger? Why does it haunt? Perhaps it is because laughter is a distilled essence of human presence, an audible mark of consciousness that refuses to vanish entirely. It is a fleeting spark that affirms existence, even when circumstances are bleak. To hear or remember laughter in the night is to confront the ephemeral yet enduring nature of life, a reminder that joy, even if momentary, leaves an imprint, a resonance, a claim upon reality that transcends the immediate moment. In this sense, haunted laughter becomes a meditation on mortality, memory, and the persistence of human experience across time and space. Even the most solitary of individuals carries this imprint. He realized that his own laughter, remembered or imagined, became part of the night's landscape, a subtle presence that shaped perception, altered the flow of thought, and illuminated memory. It was simultaneously a companion and a ghost, comforting in its familiarity, yet unsettling in its persistence. Through it, he discovered the delicate balance of human emotion, the intertwining of joy and fear, connection and isolation. Night, in its darkness, magnifies this interplay, transforming a simple act of laughter into an intricate exploration of self, history, and consciousness. Ultimately, the laughter that haunted the night is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It endures beyond immediate circumstance, beyond presence, beyond the limitations of the physical world. It is a subtle affirmation, a quiet insistence that life, in all its complexity, is worth remembering, worth experiencing, and worth feeling deeply. In the echoes of nocturnal laughter, he discovered both solace and revelation, a bridge to the past, a mirror of the present, and a whisper of the timeless human capacity for joy, reflection, and connection. There are moments when history does not speak in words, when it communicates instead through the quiet persistence of objects, landscapes, and traces long abandoned. These silent witnesses endure, their presence a testament to events, lives, and emotions now vanished from direct experience. He often wondered about these remnants, the eroded stone of a forgotten settlement, a lone tree standing on a windswept plain, or the scattered fragments of a fire pit blackened with the passage of centuries. In their quiet endurance, they offer a form of memory that transcends language, a record of human existence preserved in material form. These are the witnesses of time, watching silently as generations rise, flourish, and fade. The world itself becomes a repository of human experience. Mountains, rivers, and caves carry traces of those who came before, etched subtly in the contours of the land. Footpaths worn into the earth, hollows shaped by human labor, and natural formations repurposed as shelter or ritual space are all silent testimonies to lives once lived. In prehistoric times, the environment was not merely a backdrop, it was a co-author of human history. Every gesture, every innovation, and every choice left a mark upon the land. The silent witnesses of time are thus not passive, They are active participants, chronicling the interplay between humanity and nature, resilience and vulnerability, creation and decay. He reflected on the psychology of observing such relics. To stand among the remnants of the past is to enter a space of reverence and contemplation. The mind oscillates between imagination and evidence, reconstructing lost narratives from the faintest cues. A stone tool becomes more than an object. It is a window into the hands that shaped it, the intentions behind its creation, and the lives it touched. A wall of an abandoned structure evokes not only the labor that built it, but the social bonds, disputes, and aspirations of those who occupied it. In these silent witnesses, he found stories more compelling than any written chronicle because they spoke simultaneously of universality and individuality, the collective human endeavor and the singular human experience. The presence of these witnesses also evokes an acute awareness of time's inexorable passage. Erosion, decay, and natural transformation remind us that nothing is permanent, that even the most carefully constructed artifacts are subject to entropy. Yet, within this impermanence lies a paradoxical kind of permanence. Though individual lives vanish, their traces endure, offering glimpses into worlds that are both distant and intimately connected to our own. In reflecting upon this, he felt a profound humility. Human existence, though fleeting, leaves echoes, subtle, persistent, and capable of inspiring awe, wonder, and reflection centuries or millennia later. Silent witnesses exist not only in objects but in landscapes. The sweep of a valley, the curve of a river, or the rise of a hill can all bear the imprint of human activity, as well as the memory of natural events that shaped human adaptation. Prehistoric communities, for instance, often selected their settlements with keen awareness of topography, water sources, and defensive potential. Over time, these choices sculpted the environment, leaving behind forms that, while appearing natural, carry the fingerprint of human decision-making. He realized that to read the land carefully is to uncover an unspoken dialogue between humanity and the world, a dialogue preserved not in books but in stones, soil, and subtle topographical cues. Even the smallest traces can carry immense significance. A shard of pottery, a fragment of bone, or a faint pattern of wear on a tool can reveal intricate details about diet, ritual, social organization, and mobility. He marveled at the patience and imagination required to reconstruct life from these fragments, a process that bridges the gap between material evidence and narrative understanding. Each artifact is a vessel of memory, a silent witness conveying stories that words alone cannot capture. In contemplating these fragments, he discovered a profound connection to the humans who once shaped them, a sense of shared experience across the millennia, a recognition of common fears, hopes, and desires. There is also a haunting quality to these silent witnesses. They often confront the observer with absence as much as presence, with what is missing as much as what remains. The voids between objects, the gaps in archaeological layers, and the spaces where structures have crumbled speak as eloquently as any surviving relic. They provoke questions without easy answers. What happened here? Who once walked this path? What choices and events led to this moment of disappearance? In engaging with these absences, he felt the tension of mystery and the thrill of discovery, a duality that defines much of the human quest to understand the past. Philosophically, silent witnesses challenge our perception of time. Unlike human memory, which is selective and often fleeting, these remnants endure, indifferent to narrative or interpretation. They exist outside the linearity of personal experience, offering a perspective that stretches across centuries. By observing them, he glimpsed a form of timelessness, a reminder that human existence is both transient and part of a broader continuum. The silent witnesses thus serve as mediators between past and present, inviting reflection on mortality, legacy, and the continuity of life. In many ways, he considered them companions. They do not speak, yet their presence shapes thought and emotion. They demand attentiveness and contemplation, rewarding the observer with insights that are subtle, cumulative, and transformative. He realized that history is not only written in texts but lived through engagement with these enduring traces. Each witness, stone, landscape, or fragment, provides a portal into the human story, revealing patterns of resilience, creativity, and adaptation that continue to resonate. Ultimately, the silent witnesses of time remind us that human life, though fleeting, participates in a larger tapestry. Through careful observation, imagination, and reflection, the observer can reconstruct not only events but also emotional landscapes, societal rhythms, and philosophical truths. They are enduring symbols of presence, absence, and memory, a testament to the profound, persistent, and often haunting beauty of human existence as it unfolds across the ages. The plains stretch endlessly, a vast expanse of wind-swept grasses and distant horizons where time seems to move differently. Here, in the open spaces between forests and mountains, history whispers softly, carried on the breeze. The echoes of lives once lived resonate through this emptiness, faint but persistent, like a heartbeat in the soil itself. He imagined footsteps long vanished, the subtle disturbances of earth that mark human passage, paths worn into the ground by generations of hunters, gatherers, and travelers. These plains, seemingly empty, are dense with memory, each undulation and hollow holding stories that refuse to be silenced. The echoes are not merely metaphorical, they manifest in physical traces, in ways the earth preserves the imprint of human activity. Buried beneath the grasses may lie ancient campsites, the charred remnants of fires, or discarded tools that once held the weight of survival. He marveled at how the simplest acts, cutting wood, striking flint, shaping clay, can leave lasting marks, inscriptions written not in ink but in soil and stone. These subtle traces become a conversation across millennia, a dialogue between the living and the long-departed, and he found himself listening intently, attuned to the rhythm of that distant past. In contemplating these plains, he felt the profound vulnerability of human existence. Unlike settlements fortified by walls or natural defenses, the open plains expose life to the forces of nature, storms, predators, and the shifting seasons. Survival here demanded ingenuity, cooperation, and a keen understanding of the environment. Prehistoric humans navigated these challenges with tools, strategies, and social bonds that were tested daily. The echoes of these struggles remain inscribed in the very fabric of the land, a testament to both resilience and fragility. Yet, the plains also hold moments of extraordinary wonder. Dawn casts long shadows over the grasses, illuminating the contours of the land with a golden glow. The wind carries scents and sounds that awaken memories, both literal and imagined, the distant cry of an animal, the rustle of leaves, the murmured voices of those long gone. He imagined these sensory impressions forming the backdrop of everyday life, shaping perception, emotion, and even culture. The plains, in their openness, are not merely a stage for human activity, they are active participants in shaping thought, experience, and memory. There is a peculiar intimacy in such landscapes. Though vast and often intimidating, they allow for reflection on the smallest details. He noticed how a single stone out of place, a depressional mark in the soil, or a faint path between hills could reveal profound information about past activity. These small signs act as guides for imagination, enabling a reconstruction of narrative from fragmentary evidence. The echoes across the plains are therefore both literal and interpretive, requiring both observation and empathy to fully appreciate. He considered the philosophical weight of these echoes. They represent continuity and impermanence simultaneously. Human lives have passed over these lands countless times, each leaving its imprint, yet each ultimately succumbing to the forces of nature and time. And yet, even as individual existences fade, the land preserves the memory of collective experience. The plains act as a bridge between mortality and permanence, offering a form of immortality not through individual remembrance but through the persistence of traces that continue to speak long after the voices themselves have vanished. The social dimension of these plains cannot be ignored. For prehistoric communities, open landscapes were not empty, they were meeting places, hunting grounds, and migration routes. Encounters with other groups, friendly or hostile, shaped culture, technology, and survival strategies. He imagined the interplay of fear, cooperation, and curiosity that defined human interaction across these expanses. The echoes of these dynamics linger, evident in settlement patterns, defensive positions, and even the distribution of artifacts. The plains, in this sense, are both stage and record, capturing not only the physical movements of humans but also the emotional and social contours of their lives. Natural events also leave echoes, often intertwining with human history. Floods, fires, storms, and droughts imprint themselves on the land, sometimes erasing traces, sometimes preserving them in new forms. He reflected on how human adaptation is inseparable from these environmental rhythms, and how resilience is written both in tools and in behavior. Observing the plains, he could almost hear the dialogue between humans and nature, a continuous negotiation that determined survival, shaped innovation, and influenced the course of human history. The plains also evoke a sense of solitude and introspection. Standing among these wide-open spaces, he felt the tension between insignificance and connection, between isolation and belonging. These lands, though uninhabited now, once hosted vibrant, complex human experiences. Every stone, every hollow, and every path carries the weight of lives spent in contemplation, labor, and survival. The echoes across the plains are therefore emotional as much as material, offering insight into the interior lives of those who traverse them. Finally, he recognized that these echoes serve as a meditation on temporality. The plains remind him that history is not linear, it is layered, overlapping, and intertwined with the natural world. Past, present, and future coexist in the subtle interactions between land and life. By attuning himself to these echoes, he glimpsed the profound continuity of existence, the persistent human effort to leave a mark and the inevitability of transformation. In this reflective space, the plains became not only a landscape but a teacher, revealing truths about resilience, memory, and the enduring dialogue between humanity and the world it inhabits. In contemplating the echoes across the forgotten plains, he felt a mixture of awe and melancholy, wonder and humility. These spaces, at once vast and intimate, quiet and resonant, exemplify the paradox of human existence, fleeting yet enduring, fragile yet transformative. The plains are a canvas on which the passage of time has left intricate, layered inscriptions, inviting those who come later to listen, to imagine, and to reflect on the intricate tapestry of life that unfolded here. He lingered on the thought of the solitary man, the one who laughed alone, whose presence once radiated warmth across a small, transient community. There is a profound tragedy in such a figure, a life marked by vivid emotion, yet ultimately unshared or unrecognized by those who might have remembered it. His laughter, once bright and resonant, had faded into echoes, leaving only traces in the memories of the land and the subtle imprints of human activity. In contemplating this, he felt the weight of isolation, the fragility of connection, and the paradoxical resilience of the human spirit. The smile itself, imagined or preserved in fleeting evidence, serves as a window into inner life. Across the vast span of prehistory, expressions like this, the laughter, the joy, the sorrow, have been lost to time, leaving only hints in skeletal remains, cave art, or the careful arrangement of objects. Yet, even in absence, these traces speak volumes. They hint at moments of play, of storytelling, of bonding. They suggest a capacity for profound emotion, a recognition of beauty, and an awareness of the fleeting nature of existence. This laughter, though isolated, is emblematic of the enduring human capacity to find joy amid adversity. In reflecting on the forgotten face, he considered the universality of human experience. Laughter, a sound so ordinary and intimate, becomes extraordinary when set against the vast silence of history. It is a reminder that each individual, no matter how small in the scope of time, carries the same depth of feeling, the same struggles, the same joys. He imagined the man moving through daily life, gathering food, watching the shifting sky, feeling the warmth of sunlight on his skin, moments punctuated by laughter, moments of recognition that life, in its impermanence, is profoundly beautiful. The surroundings themselves become extensions of memory. Every stone, every tree, every ridge where he may have rested carries an imprint of presence. The laughter once heard here is gone, yet the space itself seems to hum with its resonance. Nature and humanity are entwined in a subtle dance, each shaping the other. The landscape holds not just the physical traces of life but also its emotional echoes, preserving in its silence a form of witness. The forgotten face becomes a symbol of all who have come before, whose joys and sorrows, smiles and silences remain partially hidden, yet fundamentally impactful. He contemplated the emotional resonance of solitary laughter. There is a paradoxical power in a laugh that exists for no audience but oneself, a defiance of despair, a private rebellion against the inevitability of mortality. In prehistory, survival was harsh, and moments of joy were rare and precious. The man's laughter, therefore, was not frivolous but essential. It was a pulse of humanity, a brief illumination in the vast shadow of existence. By imagining this, he felt the intimate weight of personal experience, the way in which even solitary acts carry profound significance. This section also reflects on the philosophical implications of remembrance. The forgotten face is a metaphor for countless lives unrecorded in history, whose voices are absent from written chronicles or monumental inscriptions. Yet, history is not merely the sum of recorded events, it is also the unseen, the unheard, the fleeting. By focusing on a single isolated figure, he draws attention to the millions whose experiences form the subtle undercurrent of humanity's story. Each laugh, each smile, each emotion contributes to the tapestry of life, even if the world forgets the individual threads. He imagined the man's relationships, subtle and understated, shaped by fleeting encounters and shared experiences. Perhaps he had companions, brief alliances forged in the struggle for survival, only to disperse with the passage of time. The laughter may have been shared or may have been a solitary comfort. In either case, it signifies a rich interior life, a consciousness aware of its own joys and sorrows, capable of reflection, creativity, and emotional depth. The laughter thus becomes a testament to the enduring human desire to engage with the world meaningfully, even in the face of impermanence. The section also dwells on sensory impressions, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the chill of early morning mist, the smell of fire and earth. These are the textures of life that accompany laughter, the subtle background against which emotion is expressed. By attending to these details, he reconstructs not just the man's physical existence but the qualitative essence of experience, the feeling of being alive in a world at once beautiful, threatening, and ephemeral. The forgotten smile is inseparable from these experiences. It emerges naturally from the interplay of body, environment, and consciousness. There is a meditation here on mortality and legacy. The man's life, brief and largely unrecorded, raises questions about what it means to leave a mark. Legacy is often measured in grand monuments or historical records, yet the simplest acts, the shared laugh, the smile at a passing companion, the careful crafting of tools, carry their own subtle weight. The forgotten face reminds us that even fleeting joys matter, that small human acts reverberate quietly, and that significance is not solely a function of scale or recognition. It is an affirmation that life, even when overlooked, is inherently meaningful. Finally, this section closes with reflection on the emotional and philosophical resonance of the forgotten face. He felt both sorrow and wonder, sorrow for the impermanence of human life, wonder at the persistent traces left behind. The smile, the laugh, the solitary joy, they endure not as monuments, but as faint, persistent echoes in memory, imagination, and the landscape itself. The section invites the audience to pause, reflect, and recognize the richness of lives often lost to history, encouraging empathy, introspection, and a deeper appreciation for the fleeting brilliance of existence. In the end, the last smile of a forgotten face leaves the viewer with a lingering sense of beauty and melancholy, a meditation on the power of small joys and an intimate awareness of humanity's fragile yet enduring presence on this planet. The solitary laughter becomes a bridge across time, connecting past and present in a quiet but profound embrace. As the story of the solitary man comes to its quiet close, there is a profound stillness that settles over the narrative, a pause in which reflection becomes possible. The laughter that once rang out alone, the fleeting joys, the small gestures of life, they all merge into the eternal silence of time. In this silence, the echoes of human experience take on a different dimension. They are no longer bound by the urgency of survival or the immediacy of presence. They exist instead as subtle imprints, resonating faintly in the imagination, waiting to be rediscovered and understood. It is in this space that we confront the nature of existence itself, our fleetingness, our persistence, and the delicate interplay between the two. Time, in this final reflection, stretches infinitely, folding past, present, and future into a single continuum. The solitary man, once living, breathing, laughing, now occupies both a literal and metaphorical space in the human story. He becomes emblematic of countless lives lost to the vast expanse of history, each one as vivid and complex as his own, yet largely unrecorded. Their experiences, joys, and sorrows continue to ripple outward, influencing the present and shaping the consciousness of those who come after. By contemplating him, we are invited to consider the impermanent nature of life and the subtle threads that connect us all across generations. Silence, paradoxically, is not emptiness. It is a canvas on which memory, imagination, and meaning converge. Within this silence, we hear the faint traces of existence, the rustle of leaves that once shaded the man's resting place, the soft patter of rain on the earth he traversed, the whisper of wind across stone and soil. These elements become the carriers of narrative, telling the story of life without words. The man's laughter, though no longer audible, is preserved in this quiet, a reminder that human emotion is not confined to immediate perception but endures in the subtle interplay of environment and memory. There is also an emotional reckoning in this reflection. To confront the solitude of a life so richly felt, yet largely unseen, is to confront our own relationship with impermanence. We recognize the fragility of human connection, the fleeting nature of recognition, and the inevitability of mortality. And yet, within this recognition, there is also beauty, a profound appreciation for the intensity of lived experience, for the moments of joy and sorrow, for the capacity to feel deeply even in isolation. The solitary man's existence reminds us that the quality of life is not measured by its visibility or acknowledgement, but by the depth of engagement with the world, however brief or quiet it may be. Philosophically, this section meditates on the concept of legacy. What does it mean to leave a mark? Is it in monuments, in recorded history, in tales passed down? Or is it, perhaps, in the subtle ways lives intersect, in laughter shared or felt in solitude, in the faint impression left on the world by mere existence? The solitary man's legacy is not in tangible artifacts or grand achievements, but in the intangible resonance of his life, an echo that lingers in thought, imagination, and the landscape itself. It challenges us to reconsider our definitions of significance, urging a deeper, more nuanced understanding of impact and remembrance. The environment, as ever, plays a silent but central role. The forests, rivers, and mountains he once traversed remain unchanged in essence, yet they carry within them the memory of life. Stones bear the weight of footprints now erased, water remembers the reflection of the sky he gazed upon, and the wind moves through spaces once occupied by fleeting presence. Nature becomes both witness and archivist, preserving moments that would otherwise be lost to the void. In this interplay between human life and environment, we see a reflection of the broader cycles of existence, emergence, flourishing, decline, and quiet persistence. The section also dwells on introspection and emotional resonance. The solitary man becomes a mirror for the viewer's own reflections on life, isolation, and connection. In imagining his laughter, his solitude, his fleeting joys, we confront our own capacity for empathy, memory, and imagination. We are reminded that even brief moments of conscious experience carry weight and significance, that lives, both observed and unobserved, are filled with meaning. The eternal silence does not diminish this significance, rather, it amplifies it, creating a space for quiet contemplation and emotional depth. In this final reflection, there is also a meditation on time and memory. History is not merely a sequence of events but a living tapestry of human experience, woven from both presence and absence. The solitary man, though long gone, continues to inhabit this tapestry, his laughter and existence reverberating faintly through the ages. Memory, imagination, and storytelling serve as bridges across the chasm of time, connecting us to those who came before. In honoring his life, we honor the countless others whose stories are similarly lost yet intrinsically valuable. Finally, the narrative draws to a meditative, cinematic close. The audience is invited to linger in silence, to absorb the weight and beauty of impermanence, to reflect on the power of memory and imagination. The solitary man's life, though unrecorded and largely forgotten, has achieved a quiet immortality through contemplation. His laughter, once solitary, now resonates within the minds of those who listen, reminding us of the depth of human experience, the inevitability of solitude, and the enduring beauty of existence. It is a final meditation on life, memory, and the quiet echoes that connect us all. As the screen darkens and the narrative concludes, the viewer is left with a sense of calm reflection, a lingering awareness of humanity's fragile yet persistent presence, and a profound recognition of the beauty and melancholy inherent in every life, no matter how solitary or fleeting. In this eternal silence, the solitary man's laughter lives on, inviting each listener to pause, reflect, and embrace the quiet profundity of being.